IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. Trevor, we are one day away from the first ever college football playoff game to be played on a college campus, and it will be played at the University of Notre Dame inside Notre Dame Stadium. This is what it's all about, Trevor. All the offseason work, all the ups and downs this team had to go through the regular season. It all boils down to creating this opportunity for yourselves as a football team to go out there and play for a championship. And that journey starts tomorrow night when the Irish take on the Indiana Hoosiers. Notre Dame Nation is fired up, Trevor. What say you?
Man, I can't, to be honest with you, I can't put into words how excited I am. I mean, I'm a big guy with storylines, and you kind of look at this Notre Dame football team and the journey that it took for them to get there. And you cap that all off with the first ever home college football playoff game being in South Bend, Indiana. I don't know if you can write it up better than that. You know what I mean? It's fitting after what this team had to go through, after what some of the players and what some of the coaches had to go through to get to this point. I know I'm not on the team, but I'm sure a lot of other people feel similar. Like I feel like I was a part of the ride, right? Like I felt the highs after Texas A&M and, the lowest of lows after the Northern Illinois loss. And then it was a slow rebuild back to where they're at right now. You cap it off with a 14-point road win over USC, and man, all leading to this.
I'll be honest with you, Trevor, and this is going to be a little mini soapbox for just about a minute. One of the frustrations I have in listening to players talk and former Notre Dame players talk on Twitter, they get real mouthy about what Notre Dame fans should or shouldn't feel, and want to be like, hey, guy, that passion that they have that you guys love to mock is why you're on scholarship. It's why you're going to be getting NIL money. It's why anyone listens to your podcast. It's why anyone listens to our podcast, because they have a passion for that program, and you need to stop telling them how to think and how to feel because they're on this ride with you, right? They're going to love you when you do well, and they're going to hold you accountable when you don't, and that's part of the journey, right? I mean, if a fan boos you, you should be more mad at yourself for whatever mistake you made that led to your team not winning a football game than the otherwise. And that is a little bit of a frustration I have, Trev, and it made me think of what you just said, is because everybody in this chat, everybody listening has been on this ride with this football team. No, you're not the ones that are out there making the tackles and making the blocks and making the throws and making the catches. And yes, there are absolutely some people on social media that act like absolute idiots in how they treat players. I've said, don't tweet at players that negative things. That's not what you should be doing as a fan. But that passion, the fact that they care about whether or not the jerseys are going to be black or blue or green, that passion is why millions of people watch your football games. It's why tens of thousands of people show up to every home game that you play. Sometimes hundreds of thousands of people will show up to road games that you play. Why they buy your jerseys, why they buy your gear, why they do all these things, why they pay $10 for a drink at the game, why they pay hundreds of dollars to park at a game, is because they have that joy, that love, that passion for this program that I wish players would understand more. I feel like the older players back in the day understood that and they embraced it more. And they looked at the bad fans as kind of like, that's not the majority, that's the minority. And I think in some ways, social media has soured that relationship a little bit between fans and players of a lot of different programs. And what players need to understand is the vast majority of fans are not like the people that send you hate crap on Twitter. They're not. They support you through and through. But that's the journey that you all have been on this year with this team, that we've all been on with this team. And that's what makes being a fan fun, is because you get to enjoy the highs and the highest of the highs. You get to kind of feel the pain of those lows, right? But to get back to this team on September 7th, we kind of woke up on that September 7th, Trevor, and you thought about where this football team was and who this Notre Dame football team is going to be. And we said to ourselves, boy, this team, path to the playoffs, super easy now because of that win last week. By the end of September 7th, you're thinking, I don't know if this team's going to have a shot to make the college football playoff. And because you're now in a one and done, win or go home scenario for the rest of the season. And to see these players respond the way they did to that moment, not just the next week where they destroyed Purdue 66-7, but the next week and the next week and the next week and the next week. And to see how this team came together, and whatever the reason for why they came together, whoever the villain was for this football team. It doesn't matter because they came together as a team, had to overcome a lot of adversity to get here. Now you're here. Now the opportunity is in front of you. Now the Northern Illinois game does not matter to you anymore. You don't have – it doesn't matter. The Purdue game doesn't matter. The USC game doesn't matter. The Louisville game doesn't matter. All that was done to get you here. Now it's about what you do moving forward. And this team, boy, I tell you what, it has been fun to watch this last month, Trev, but now they're in a situation where it's like, okay, now it's time to be the best version of yourself. Marcus Freeman preaches that all the time. Every single day, every single rep, it's about being the best version of yourself. It's not about outcome results. It's process related. And this team has stuck to that. And if they can stick to that here on Friday night, you feel like there's going to be some good results. And that's what I'm excited for. And we're going to talk about those today, Trev. We're going to talk about the keys to victory for this Notre Dame football team in all phases of the game. We're going to talk about, we're going to give our predictions, hand out some game balls. And of course, we'll be joined by Bill Bender from Sporting News, who will be with us to preview the other 3 playoff games that were going to happen on Saturday because they're all huge. Let's be honest, they're all huge, but there's a reason why this game is being played on Friday night as the standalone game because it is still Notre Dame. It is still Notre Dame. And I can't wait. I know you'll be there. I'll be there. It's going to be a lot of fun, Trev, and I'm ready to get going to these keys.
Yeah, man, I can't wait. I can't say that enough. I'm going to sound like a broken record by the end of today's show, but I'm excited to dive into it today with you, Brian. We're going to talk and cover a lot of good things. So I'm ready, man.
So let's get into some of the keys, Trev. And obviously there's a lot of different aspects of it. There's special teams keys, which in this game, it's very simple. Do no harm, right? It's do no harm. Control field position. If you get a chance to make a field goal, you got to nail it. Got to make your extra points. Got to get your punts off, right? You got to field the punch. Can't turn the ball over. All those type of things. So we'll get those special teams out of the way. Do no harm is the great loose emoji always said. The other one is, Trev, is obviously the turnover battle in a game like this where you have 2 very evenly matched football teams statistically in a lot of different ways. You've got to go out there and you've got to get the football. When you get look, you and I have broken down a lot of film. There's opportunities for team to get the football from Curtis Work. Not a lot of people have been able to take advantage, but there's opportunities there. Notre Dame has to do that. You have to do what you've done all year. It's just, in this regard, be what you have been all year, which is huge at forcing turnovers and great at protecting the football. For the most part, great at protecting the football. You've got to continue to do that all season, Trev. Notre Dame has forced a turnover in every single game since that September 7th Saturday afternoon inside Notre Dame Stadium. They forced at least 1 turnover in every game since then, and they forced at least turnovers in all but 2 games since then. And in the 2 games they didn't force 2 turnovers, they still won by 42 and 35. And so this is a team that's been great at forcing turnovers. That has to continue. You've got to protect the football. Obviously, those are going to be big keys. And then the last thing, Trev, as I kick it to you, is this one. In order to win a playoff game and continue to put yourself in position to play for a championship, survive and advance, adversity is going to come in some form or fashion, whether it's a mistake being made, whether it's a turnover, whether it's an injury, no matter what it is, a lack of focus, a missed tackle, a dropped interception, something is going to happen to this football team that will be an adverse situation. The team that best responds to adversity, short fields, backed up, whatever the case may be, the team that responds best to adversity is going to have the best opportunity to put themselves in position to win this football game. And for Notre Dame, it needs to be them if they're going to win this game.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll kind of start where you did. I mean, special teams just execute. That's the name of the game. You don't have to go out and start nailing 55-yard field goals and returning punts for touchdowns. Again, wouldn't be upset if either of those happened, but just do your job. Just execute. To your point, do no harm. For winning the turnover battle, for the most part, Notre Dame's offense has done a pretty good job of protecting the football this year, especially Riley Leonard making the majority of the time pretty good decisions. But those really blatant bad decisions can't be present. Can't be. But in an ideal world, yeah, sure, every football game is played perfectly, which is why I'm really glad that you included respond to adversity. And you go through and you look at the opportunities that Notre Dame has had as a team to respond to adversity this year, right? Big picture, macro view. You look at how they responded from September 7th. But then if you start to dive into individual games, right? I think back to Louisville. You muff the opening kickoff. September 28th, you might let them punch in a touchdown on a short field. Playoffs, you got to do everything that you can to force a field goal, right? You have to do what you can with the opportunities that you do. You fast forward to USC. Riley Leonard throws a bad interception. The defense, I believe, forced a 4-and-out and a turnover on downs, if not a punt. So you're going to have to do everything that you can to maximize the opportunity you have when you have the opportunity to respond to adversity, right? Because it's a fool's dream to sit back and think that this game is going to go perfectly for Notre Dame. You have a hungry 11-1 football team coming in that believe that when they step onto the turf, they're going to be the best field out, or they're going to be the best team out there. They firmly believe that. And so you're going to have to find a way to respond to adversity, whether it be, if the defense doesn't get the start that you need to. You need that offense from Louisville. You need that offense from USC. You need that offense from Army. You know what I mean? And on the flip side of that coin, if, the offense comes out and sputters, it might be a little bit exhausting, but it's like, hey, defense, we need you. Defense, you got to step up right now and give the offense time to get their feet under them. So, they haven't played a game in 3 weeks. And like we've talked about all season long, they're a rhythm-based offense. So it's unrealistic to think that they're going to play a perfect game. So you're going to have to do everything in your power you can to respond to the adversity when it comes across your plate.
And that's the reality of playing good football teams, Trevor.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look, I don't care how well Christian Gray and Leonard Moore play on Friday night. They're going to get beat on a play. It happens. And that's why Marcus Freeman preaches one play at a time. Because if you don't preach that, then all of a sudden that lingers and that snowballs into that next play. That's a form of adversity in a game. As you have that missed tackle that resulted in a 20-yard gain. What do you do the next time? Do you try to, okay, now I've got to go make up for it by doing something outside of the framework of what I'm asked to do, which then leads to another mistake? Do I then put all this pressure on myself? It's about who handles that adversity the best. And sometimes it just means, dude, move on. We're good. Move on. I got you. And sometimes it's somebody else picking you up. If one of the receivers drops a ball, it's up to Riley Leonard to say, hey, man, get your head up. Don't worry about that. I'm coming right back to you. We've seen him do that multiple times this year. When guys drop balls, comes right back to him, like either the next play or the next series. That's his way of saying, hey, dude, don't sweat it. I got you. We got you. And then, of course, Mike Denbrock has to call the plays to give that guy an opportunity. And so the things you look at is who's going to step up and fill that void, who's going to step up and make that play, who's going to step up and replace the guy that goes down, whatever the case may be. And the team that does the best job of that is the one that's going to win. It's the one that's going to have the best opportunity to win, right? Because all those things, there's other things that factor into it, but it's going to give you the best chance, the best foundation to win this football game. And so far, the last 10 games, Notre Dame has been a great team at responding to adversity. Because we talk a lot about how they've dominated the last 10 games and they've won by X number of points and those type of things. But it hasn't always been smooth sailing, Trevor. Like Notre Dame ended up pounding Georgia Tech pretty good. But that game was 7-0, right? At the end of the first quarter. Notre Dame was not playing very well in that game. You had thrown in interception. Riley Leonard had thrown an interception that had allowed them to move the ball down the field. I mean, you think about that Miami game and how right away, after all the struggles that Notre Dame has had, they had put themselves in a really bad spot, right? I mean, a really bad spot where, your defense forces a punt and what was it? They fumbled a ball, right? Trying to remember how they got that that next possession. I believe Notre Dame fumbled a punt, right? And then
I think that gave them Faison, maybe.
Yeah. So, I mean, you had those situations, and then what happens? Who steps up? It's Christian Gray and Junior Tuihalamaka to force an interception. You think about, the Louisville game, you opening kickoff. You're thinking, okay, this is your chance. You get things rolling, and boom, fumbled kickoff on the first kickoff of the game. And you're thinking, here we go again, right? Nope. Defense gives up a touchdown, and you're like, well, there it goes, right? And what happens? Offense immediately responds. Goes down the field, scores a touchdown. Next play on defense, blown assignment by a linebacker, quarterback runs. Well, okay, guess this defense isn't locked in today. Guess this elite defense isn't here to play today. Leonard Moore, elite hustle and speed, comes up behind, knocks the ball out of the quarterback's hands. All of a sudden, a negative turns into a positive, right? Didn't quit on the play like, oh, man, whose fault is that? It wasn't my fault. It's like, oh, I got to go make a play. What does the offense do? Takes it right down the field and scores a touchdown. Right, we saw that, and then from that moment on, fell behind Stanford 7-0, scored the next 49 points. Right, I mean, it hasn't been always smooth sailing where they just kind of rolled the ball out there and it was no problem, and they went out and just, put that team away and just dominate. I mean, Virginia was a little bit sloppy early in that game. Your first defensive possession against Florida State, you allowed them to go right down the field and kick a field goal. It hasn't always been super, super easy. They've made it look easier because of how well they respond to those circumstances. And now you've got to continue rolling with that as we get into the postseason. So, Trev, let's dive into the keys to victory for the Notre Dame offense. And this first one, Trevor, is going to be easy. We know what it's going to be. You know what it is, guys.
Sure,
everybody. It's the same thing now. If it was important during the regular season, it is definitely important now. That is true in a lot of different ways. Start fast. Here's the main reasons why, Trev, as I kind of kick it to you here. Number one, you've got to shake off some of the time off rust from not having played a game in 3 weeks. That's number one. Getting back into an early rhythm on offense, number one. Number two, any thought that Indiana has that, hey, we're going to shut the offense down like we've shut everybody else down, including Ohio State, because Ohio State got most of their points on special teams plays, right? Short fields off of a muff punt return for a touchdown. We're going to shut Notre Dame down just like we've shut everybody else down. You need to let them know, not today. Not happening today. Jump on them early. And then 3, protect your defense. The more you score early, the more you protect your defense. Either A, by jumping up on Indiana and then putting Indiana in catch-up mode, or B, like we saw back in 2020 when they traveled to North Carolina and they had trouble stopping that Carolina offense early in that game. They scored on their first 2 possessions? Carolina did. Notre Dame's offense answered each one with a score. By the time that they had tied the game up 14-14, the defense had made some adjustments, and they kind of had a plan and said, okay, we're good to go, and then they dominated Carolina the rest of the way. But if you're all of a sudden 14-0 and your offense isn't matching, now you're in a little bit of a catch-up mode, and that's not where you want to be in this kind of game, Trevor. So those are for me, the 3 big reasons why starting fast is so important in this football game.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, protect your defense. We spent all week talking about the depth of the receiving cores for Indiana. And I am one of the people that is under the belief that the USC game was kind of a fluke and the team was tired and, they just got done playing 12 straight games. 2 bye weeks sprinkled in there, but it's not compared to the amount of rest that they got from USC to tomorrow night, right? But you don't want to put your defense in a position to find out if the USC game was a fluke or if it's truly the lack of overall depth that's kind of hindering them a little bit, making them not as quick and making them not trust their technique and getting a little lazy in coverage and you start grabbing, right? So for all of those things, it goes back to talking about complementary football, and Notre Dame's offense has to do everything that they can to start fast in this football game. We always talk about how Notre Dame's defense is set up in a way where I don't know if teams can come back on them, which I also believe. On the flip side of that coin, mostly because we haven't had to see it that much this season, I don't know what type of Notre Dame offense we would see if they fall behind in a 14-0 game. You know what I mean? So that's a little bit of an unknown. Eliminate that doubt, eliminate that speculation. You know what I mean?
What's been their biggest deficit this year? It's 7 points, right?
Yeah, 7-0 against Stanford.
They were never down more than 6 against Northern Illinois.
No.
Right? They were never down more than 3 against Texas A&M.
Yeah.
They were never down more than 7 against Louisville. They were never down more than 7 against Stanford, never down more than 7 against Georgia Tech, never down. I mean, they of course they scored first against Purdue, Miami of Ohio, Navy, Florida State, Virginia, Army, and USC. They literally never trailed against USC. So, this is not a team that has fallen behind by more than 7 points. And think about that. They've never trailed by more than 7 points the entire season. So, yeah, but that's also why you start fast, because you don't want to have to find out how you'd play in that type of scenario. Don't get down. Don't get down those scores, and don't because that takes you out of what you want to do offensively. That's the other thing too, Trev, is you start falling behind early and that team jumps out on you, and all of a sudden that whole let's run the ball and control the tempo and control the game, all of a sudden that becomes a little harder to do because now all of a sudden possessions are going to be a little bit more limited for you.
Yeah, and one of the reasons why Notre Dame's offense has been so dangerous this year, one of the reasons why they averaged 39.8 points per game is because they have worked off of their own schedule, right? Like they dictate the pace of that game offensively. And if you put them down 14-0, I think it's going to be a different, depending on when that is. right? But most of the time, teams, when they go down by 2 scores, don't just typically come out and run the same style of offense. So the only other thing that I would add to start fast is it is a home playoff game. Use that to your advantage. You want to start fast and you want to get the crowd into it early and keep them rowdy. You start fast, man. I mean, I am a big believer that I think crowds can affect the, not necessarily the execution of the game, but crowds do play a factor. And Indiana's walking into, from a stage perspective, the biggest game that they have played in, right? Arguably as a program.
Ever.
Right. And so, teams have struggled coming in here and playing at nighttime. You look at Ohio State last year. You look at what Clemson's track record is coming to South Bend playing at nighttime. And so this is not an easy place to go in and win. You have Michigan 2018 comes in and they have to play Notre Dame at a 7:30 kickoff. This is a tough environment to play at nighttime. You want the crowd to be in it. Start fast. Start fast.
Trevor, I mean, you said you were at the USC game last year, correct?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you remember how crazy that place was when Xavier Watts picked off that first pass, and then when they punched that first drive into the, I think that was Jabron Payne caught that ball behind him. Great catch by Jabron Payne, and got the ends. I mean, that place was wild after that. I mean, people say Notre Dame doesn't get loud enough consistently because the Notre Dame crowd doesn't get super as fired up about beating Miami of Ohio as they do Miami, Florida.
Sure.
Okay, then fine. Then give them reasons to be more excited in those games. But like in these type of environments, this Notre Dame crowd, you give them a reason to get excited, they're going to have your back the whole game.
Oh my goodness!
And starting fast is going to be a big part of that.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, I go back and think about that blocked punt for a touchdown in 22 against Clemson. It was
pretty quiet at that point in time.
Yeah,
because it was a slow game up to that point in time. I mean, Notre Dame had punted, Clemson had punted. And that was, I believe, the first score of the game for either team. So, but from that moment on, like the crowd was a lot more jazzed up. I guess is a way of putting that, Trevor, because that didn't happen till about middle of the first quarter, right? Second or third possession, and then Notre Dame doesn't score again until late second quarter. But that crowd is there for you, man, the rest of that night. And starting fast also, so we're clear, is not scoring your first possession and then box checked. It's keep it going, keep it going, keep it going, keep it going. Those are the things that you're going to need to do. That's what a start fast is. It's putting, when you get the ball, you're putting points on the board. When you get the ball, you put points on the board. You get the ball, put points on the board. That's what starting fast means. It's not just scoring on your first drive, because they scored on the first drive against Northern Illinois. Hey, 7-0 ball game. Nope. Need a lot more than that to win that football game. And it's going to be true against Indiana as well. You're going to need more than your opening drive touchdown if that's what happens to win this football game. So how do you do that, Trevor? What are the things that lead to starting fast? Well, number one, Notre Dame has to establish the line of scrimmage. And I know what fans are going to say, I've got to run the ball. That's part of it. It's part of it. But it's much bigger than that. Establishing the line of scrimmage is vitally important in this game. You're facing a very good front seven from Indiana that also has two very good inside linebackers. If you let them play a downhill game, if you let them beat you off the ball, if you let them get up into your pads, if you let them stalemate you, that's what they want. If you don't handle the line games, the twists, the stunts, you don't get the movement that you need as a football team, they're going to slow you down and force you to punt the football or force you into mistakes. You have to dominate the line of scrimmage. One of the biggest changes we have seen from Notre Dame in September to Notre Dame now has been a team that is much more willing and able to take the fight to the opponent, and it starts up front. Yes, it includes running the football, but it's not just running the football. It's about establishing dominance. It's about, we're going to push you around. We're going to move you off the ball. We're going to engulf your linebackers. We're going to get you on your heels to where you can't come this way. We are going that way. The goal and objective of the offensive line is to reestablish the line of scrimmage in your favor. So if the line of scrimmage is here, you don't want to hit and stalemate. You don't want to get hit and move back. It's to hit and move forward, get that vertical push. When they do that, these backs will take the game over. But if they're going to win this game in the way that they need to win this game, in the fashion that we want to maybe see them win this game, you have to control and dominate the line of scrimmage, establish the line of scrimmage. And then that carries into the pass game as well, Trevor. Part of dominating and establishing control of the line of scrimmage is also giving Riley Leonard time to throw the football. It also means that, look, if your receivers are doing their thing, but you're not giving him time to throw, then this offense won't be able to maximize their potential, because if Indiana wants to, they can say, hey, look, you're not going to run the ball effectively on us. We're going to put 8 guys in the box, and we're just going to load you up, maybe 9 guys in the box at times, and you're not going to run on us. And good teams can take that away if you want to. So then you've got to make sure you're establishing a level of dominance up front that gives Riley Leonard time to throw the football, that lets him get the ball downfield and say to Indiana, this isn't a good idea. This isn't going to work for you the way that you think it does. So, yes, it'd be nice to come out and run the football. They need to establish the line of scrimmage, get the running game going. You're going to have to run the football at some point in time, but it also involves handling the line games, giving your quarterback time to play. And then finally, Trevor, it's a mindset thing. It's you're letting Indiana know, guys, great season by you. We're proud of what you've done, but this ain't going to go well for you tonight. Sorry. Apologies in advance. Right? It's like the scene from Harlem Nights, don't take, he stutters it, don't take this butt whooping personally. That's what it needs to be.
Yeah, I'm so happy that you included mindset, because I'm a firm believer that when you have 2 relatively equally matched teams in the trenches, right? Like I don't look at Notre Dame's offensive and defensive line, and I look at Indiana's offensive and defensive line and look at either of those and say, you know what, this one has the clear advantage, right? And so I think a lot of that comes down to taking ownership of it yourself. It comes down to, hey, look, we know what the implications are of this game. This is our line of scrimmage, right? In the run game, it's like you're not going to get penetration into the backfield. You're moving backwards. Your first step is going to be backwards no matter how much you try to go forward. And then in pass protection, it's like, hey, I'm a firm believer that pass protection comes down to a little bit of pride. It's like, hey, you're just not touching 13 tonight. Sorry. Don't know what to tell you, and so I'm really glad that you included the mentality, because I agree with everything that you said 100%, not much more to add there, but the mentality piece for me is huge. When you have 2 equally talented, equally as accomplished offensive line and defensive lines across the board, it comes down to a mindset for me.
Well, the other thing too, Trevor, is it's also key to winning situational football games. You want to be great on third down, got to be great up front. Got to control the line of scrimmage, right? 3rd and 2. Okay, yeah, your running back. We know you don't got to give your running backs that much of a crease, but you got to give them something. And if you do, they're gonna move the chains, right? At 3rd and 5, give quarterback time to throw the football. If you do, this offense is going to keep rolling. Guys are going to get open. They're going to complete balls, and they're going to move the chains. Get into the red zone. Need touchdowns, not field goals, right? Well, yeah, the backs and the skill players, but you got to give the quarterback time to throw. You got to open up run lanes for the quarterback and for the running backs. It really comes down to that. This has got to be – it's Notre Dame, man. Marcus Freeman has said we want to be a line-driven football program. Well, the playoff, the postseason is when you show that. That's when you say, okay, if this is who we're going to be, then it has to come out now. And that's what's at stake for this Notre Dame offensive line. And it's also comes from the coaching staff too, right? Like if Mike Denbrock comes out and has a game plan similar to what Steve Sarkisian had against Georgia, where he was afraid of the Georgia front and he kept running that, stretch plays and slow developing plays and was afraid to go at them, then yeah, this is what's going to happen, right? I mean, it's going to have a similar result to what Texas did or Georgia did to Texas. It's a mindset thing too, where you come down and you say, hey, listen, we're coming at you, right? We're going to keep coming at you. And that's going to be a big key. Third key, Trevor, is as we've said, this is a very good Indiana defense. It is a very disciplined Indiana defense. It is a very well-coached Indiana defense. It is a talented Indiana defense, but it is also an Indiana defense that's going to take a lot of chances, a lot of risks. They're going to try to bait you into things. You have to establish the game with them. And one of the things that you do is you have to take the fight to them with your movement. You have to get them off balance. What does that mean? Okay, it means push. It means mixing up your tempo. Sometimes you may want to come out and you're in perfect play type of mode, right? Like there's 2 ways to attack a team. One is we're trying to get into the right looks with the right movement, with the right motions to gain leverage advantages, to gain numbers advantages, to gain personnel advantages, to where we can get into perfect play scenarios, right? Where it's about, we may go, 5 plays and 60 yards, and it's going to take 3-4 minutes, right? Because we're about perfect play execution, and we're trying to use movement, motions, and shifts and things like that to gain those. That needs to be part of what Notre Dame does. The more you motion and shift, the more that they have to communicate and talk and make adjustments and shifts, and the more likely that because of how much movement they do and how much line games they play, if you snap the ball and you catch them while they're in the middle of communication because you're moving and shifting, guess what? You got a chance to gash them and to hurt them. And then, okay, so what's their answer to that? Okay, well, we're gonna have to make sure that we're doing a little bit less, right? And so that's one way to do it. The other way to do that is tempo. Mix up the tempo. So one drive you come out and you're in perfect play type of scenarios, right, where it's about numbers, leverage, and all that. The other time is we're going fast. They got to line up fast. They got to get the call in fast. They got to communicate fast because we are going. And so what happens is in these situations is you as a defense, when you get a team that is doing all those things, you have to go with more base calls. You can't play a lot of the games that you like to play because the team is because they're just having too much success with their movement, with their tempo. If you're just getting the call in and you're lined in a deuce formation or a doubles formation or a trips formation, and you're just looking at it, get lined up with moderate pace, and you're getting a call, and then you line up, and then you go, and then you look back, and then, okay, we want to run that. And they've been able to look at your 3-by-1 formation for 20 seconds. They're going to have everything in that they want to have in. Every check, every line game, every shift, everything that they want to do. All of a sudden, you do that, and then boom, we're shifting. And when we shift, we're going fast. They've got to now communicate and make calls, and those are things you need to do. So getting them off balance with your tempo and with your movement is a big part of this game, Trev.
Yeah, you talk about situational football, and I'm a big fan of tempo around situational football. You know, like I love it around third down. I do. Don't give the defense a chance to adjust if you're in 3rd and 4. You know, like give them an opportunity, give your offense an opportunity to get up to the line of scrimmage with a play call already in mind, you know, obviously with a check in there, depending on how the defense lines up to it. And then I'm also a huge fan of going tempo right after picking up a first down. You know, because like first down after first down after first down is demoralizing for a defense. So, you know, that next first down opportunity is a chance to kind of, you know, gather themselves a little bit, catch their breath a little bit, get right back up to the line of scrimmage and have a play ready to go. Keep them off balance. This is a very, very disciplined defense. They're very experienced. They've played a lot of snaps. So you got to do everything that you can in your power relatively to get them off balance, right? Like there's nothing that Notre Dame can do from like a schematic standpoint to like make IU have less snaps and less experience. You know what I mean? But do everything that you can to get them as off balance as they can, because Notre Dame has shown that they are a very explosive offense with 2 home run backs in the waiting. And very similar to how we talked about IU's running backs yesterday, about how, you know, if a linebacker misses a gap assignment and, you know, Ellison or Lawton will cut it back, you know, into the B gap and they're gone for 10 to 15 yards, 15, 20 yards maybe. You do that against Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love, I mean, they're doing the touchdown dance. You know what I mean? So do everything that you can to keep that team off balance. Tempo is a great way to do that. Misdirection, motion, use motion to your advantage when trying to create matchups. I've been huge on this all week. Slot receivers and tight ends against their linebackers is a mismatch. It is. Do everything that you can to get them involved. So
another thing that factors into keeping them off balance is Notre Dame has not always been a team that attacks all the levels of the field. They'll attack inside out with their run game, or inside with their run game, outside with their quick RPO game. They'll attack, you know, hitches and stops and comebacks and options and things like that, but they don't attack all levels of the defense, the short, the intermediate, the deep. One thing that I think you also have to do against Indiana, especially early, is be willing to attack them, yes, with some misdirection type, you know, counters, you know, using jet motions on your inside zones to maybe get their eye discipline a little bit off. If they don't react to it, then hand the ball off to Jaden Harrison or Jaden Greathouse. You know what I mean? If they're not going to respond to it. But like those things matter too. But you also have to be willing to attack all the levels of the defense, right? And you have to be able to, you know, move one way and throw back the other way, or things along those lines, using your screen game. Those are all things that you can do to keep this Indiana defense off balance, because if they're able to just get a read on what you're doing and come at you, they're going to have success. Because this is, look, and I know it's Indiana, and then they got a bunch of group of guys. I'm telling you, this is a good football team. And if you just kind of line up and say, hey, we're just going to run this out of this formation, and you kind of know what's coming, I dare you to stop it. Guess what? They're going to find ways to stop it, right? I mean, you're going to have to do things to get them off balance, and that's going to be a key for this Notre Dame football team. Last key to victory for me, Trev, and this is a big one. Obviously, you're going to talk about the running backs, but at the end of the day, Riley Leonard's got to play well in this game. And so it's important for Mike Denbrock to come out early in this game and say, we've got to get Riley Leonard going early. We got to get him to an early rhythm. Riley has tended to, not always, but a lot of times, Trevor, if he starts well, you're cooked. If he doesn't start well, he tends to put a lot of pressure on himself, and that can lead to more mistakes. When Riley comes out and he gets into a nice early rhythm as a thrower and a runner, then you're in trouble. You're in big trouble. So having a game plan that lets Riley get into a nice early rhythm with his reads, with his decision-making, with his accuracy, and mentally, then that's how the offense really rolls. So I think that's my final key is you got to figure – you have the game plan that lets Riley come out and get into a nice early rhythm and gain some confidence. And if you can do that, your offense becomes far, far more dangerous.
Yeah, put him in a position to go out and be an athlete. You know, that's when he's been at his best. Get him involved in the RPO game extremely early. Get him out of the pocket really early. Because we know who Riley Leonard is. We watch him for 12 straight football games. He's not going to just start the game by dropping back and dicing your defense apart for, 60 minutes, right? And so Denbrock and his team is going to have to do a really good job of finding ways to get him into a rhythm early. Get him outside of the pocket. Get the tight ends involved early. Get the running backs out of the backfield involved early because – I absolutely agree with you that sometimes his mistakes can compound a little bit. Not saying that interception turns into another one, but, a bad read might turn into an interception later. An interception might turn into a couple of sailed passes because he's afraid to make the same mistake. On the flip side of that coin, when he starts to roll, he rolls. Like I think of him kind of almost like a 3-point shooter in basketball. You know what I mean? Like once he sees one go in, it starts to roll from there. And that's very much how I view Riley Leonard in this offense. So if they can get him a couple of quick completions early, let him go out, maybe scramble outside of the pocket, get hit a little bit, I think it's going to bode well for Riley Leonard.
It also has to be taken into account the weather. It's going to be cold, and you kind of want him to come out and get those juices flowing a little bit early, and then not just as a runner, that's part of it, but also as a thrower. You go through pregame and you just come out and hand the ball off 8 times on that first drive, okay, that's good. But now he's a little rusty. You're going to want to get him into a rhythm in that football game. Trev, offense has got to step up and play well, man. That's it. I mean, we talked about it. Keys, start fast, establish a line of scrimmage, get Indiana off balance, using tempo, using movement, using pre and post snap movement, right? Post snap switches, things like that. Using tempo and then doing a quick jet motion, doing some sort of post snap switch, and then you bring a running back on an angle route behind it. There's a lot of different things that you can do to get them off tempo. And then finally, obviously, Riley Leonard has to come out and play well early. Mike Denbrock has to make sure there's a game plan in place for him to come out early and put him in position to be successful early. And then it's up to Riley to make those plays. Those are the keys for the Notre Dame offense against what has been a very good, very productive, and very underrated Indiana defense. Mm-hmm. So, Trev, let's get into our keys to victory for the Notre Dame defense. This side of the ball has been the glue for this team all year. There's one game this year where they needed the offense to step up for them, and they did. And that's one of the reasons that Notre Dame is here today. That just so happens that it was their most recent football game. So it's not a key to victory, but I do think getting off to an early start is, where you're getting some stops and you're, you're just not letting Indiana go up and down the field on you, I think is important. And we didn't include it in one of our keys, but as you think more about it, I do think there's some importance to this defensive football team having some early success to kind of get that USC kind of game out of their mind. I think that's at least worth noting here before we get started into the 4 keys that we established.
Yeah, I almost view it as getting back on track for Notre Dame's defense, right? Kind of that, it's almost kind of that prove it moment for them of like, okay, this was just a fluke. We were dog tired like a lot of teams were, right? And just go out and get back on track. I agree 100%.
So let's get into the keys, the 4 keys that we did establish, Trevor. And look, as we've said all week, last week, to win these type of games, it's about your best has to be your best. And for Notre Dame, the best part of their defense is right up the middle, and it's the defensive tackles. And when they play well, teams have a very, very hard time moving the football, running the football, and doing much on offense. So key number one, it's an easy one. You've got to dominate right up the middle. That means big gains from Mills and Cross. It means your backups have to play well because they can't play every single snap. So you're going to need Donovan Heinisch and Gabriel Rubio to play well also. And then, of course, your inside linebackers. Your defensive line can do their job, eat up gaps, but if you're eat up blocks, but if your linebackers are having bad fits or they're missing tackles at the line of scrimmage, doesn't matter how well your defensive line plays. It's got to be both levels. You're going to need Drake Bowen. You're going to need Jack Kaiser. You're going to need Jaden Alsbury, all to play well in this football game, including Jalen Sneed as well. They're going to have to also play well. You've got to dominate Indiana up the middle. When Maryland had success early, shutting them down, a lot of it came right up the middle. When Ohio State was dominating them, a chunk of that was coming up the middle. And then that allowed some of the edge stuff to happen because they had to spend so much time controlling the action up the middle. And then, of course, the run game. If they can't get a push in up the middle with their big veteran guards, their run game struggles. And so they're going to have to be very effective up the middle. Dominate up the middle, and you've got a shot to slow this Indiana offense down.
Notre Dame's defense has been at its best this season when they're strong up the middle. I think of games like Georgia Tech. I think of the game, the Louisville game where they kind of had their coming out party, especially the two D tackles and Howard Cross and Riley Mills. You look at how dominant they were against Army, and then on the flip side of that coin, one of the issues for Notre Dame's defense against USC is they weren't that strong up the middle. I wouldn't go as far as call it a liability, but it wasn't what it was.
It wasn't dominant.
Right.
It wasn't dominant.
Right. And so when Notre Dame's defense is at its best, with as good as their secondary has been and as good as they've been out in space and with how fast we know this defense is, at the end of the day, when they've been able to dominate up the middle, kind of like almost like their personal identity as a defense, when they are strong up the middle, then you combine it with all of those other things. This is a really, really difficult defense to move the ball on. So I agree with you. All four of the defensive tackles that rotate in, maybe it could be more in this playoff game, who knows, but all four of the defensive tackles that rotate in and the interior linebackers up the middle need to have a really, really good game tomorrow night.
If Indiana comes out and tries to establish a run game like I think they're going to, I do. I think Indiana's going to run the ball and take shots. That's what I think their game plan is going to be. I'm going to have a couple videos and breakdowns on the premium board where I'm going to take a couple pass concepts that I think that we're going to see from Indiana. And the first one that I'm going to do, Trevor, is their go routes, their outside go balls, the back shoulder throws. There's no way that offensive staff is going to break down the USC game and think anything other than, hey, we've got the guys that can take those shots as well. We've got to make sure we're doing some things along those lines as well, because they have a quarterback that throws a great back shoulder ball, and they have receivers that have shown the ability, as I'll show. This isn't like one game. I've got clips from the Nebraska game. I've got clips from the Maryland game. I've got clips from the Michigan game. I can show you clips from just about every game they've played this year where they've hit that throw and say, hey, this is something you got to be aware of. They do a lot of stutter and goes. They do slant and goes, right? The touchdown pass to Surratt beat the Michigan corner on number 20. It was on a stutter and go, stop and go. Michigan guy bit on it. He ran right outside of him, wide open for a touchdown. We've seen them do that stuff. I've seen them run out and ups, like old school out and ups, just like, look, 10-yard out, boom, up, those type of things. They're going to take their shots in this football game. There's no doubt about it. But a lot of it's going to be predicated on running the football at Notre Dame to set that up, to get those safeties down in the box. And that's going to present, I think, especially Drake Bowen with a lot of opportunities and Jack Kaiser with a lot of opportunities to impact the run game positively or negatively. And if Notre Dame's going to shut down the run game, I think those two kids especially are going to have a lot of tackles in this football game. And they're going to have to play at their best football season, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they could do. Number 2, Trev, and this is incredibly important, and it encompasses so many different aspects of this game. The way Indiana coaches, discipline, but also smart, moving guys around, mixing up tempos. They're not a team that goes fast a lot, but they'll push it a little bit at times. They do a lot of movement, a lot of different formation groups. They'll go 11 personnel. They'll go 12 personnel. They'll mix things up a lot. They're going to try to do a lot of things to confuse you, to get you to make mistakes. As we talk about double moves, a lot of levels concepts. There's a play that they scored a touchdown on. It was very similar to the one Notre Dame scored on against Virginia, where they had a post-snap switch and it looked like the guy was going to work out, and then he works back inside on the slant, catches it, Rourke hits him right in the chest. He goes in for, I think, about a 12-yard touchdown. They force you to make a lot of decisions, pre-snap and post-snap, with how they come at you. Requires discipline to be at a season high level, right? Season best level. You've got to be disciplined. That means don't allow them to out leverage you with their movements and their formations, right? You've got to see it and adjust to it. But also then don't overplaying the leverage, because sometimes they're doing that to get you to overplay it and they're coming backside with a counter. Over adjust to the two tight end alignment, and then they're just going to run a counter backside and they're going to log you and bounce it outside, right? It means don't fall for the double moves, right? Be disciplined in what you do. Yeah, come down on that out cut, but come down at an angle that allows you to take that out and up if they hit it. Don't fall for double moves, right? You can tell the difference if you're a well-coached defensive back between a guy's about to run a stop route, he's trying to get you to stutter so he can beat you. It's about properly handling the post-snap switch routes, right? There's got to be good communication. We saw against Georgia Tech and Leonard Moore's first start that there were some miscommunication moments in that game between him and the safeties and other positions that allowed Georgia Tech to hit a couple big plays in the pass game. You can't allow that to happen in this football game. You've got to be disciplined. And, of course, they're going to do a lot of misdirection, a lot of screen game, a lot of counters, a lot of using jet motions to try to get you one way and coming back the other way, trying to suck you down with their run action on an RPO. They're going to pull that thing and get it outside. Discipline is such an important part of handling this Indiana offense. And, honestly, not a lot of teams have been able to handle it for 4 quarters. We've seen teams like Maryland and Michigan State and Northwestern have some success early, and then next thing you know, it's big play here, big play there. And wow, we were in this game for a minute, and all of a sudden it's 21-7, 28-7, and now we're way down. And you're wondering how it happened, because they can score in a hurry, this Indiana offense. I mean, and like Nebraska was like dial a big play. I mean, it's just like every other play was like, okay, big play here, big play there, big play there, for a defense that otherwise has been pretty good so far this season. But they didn't have discipline in that game. So they ran a post-snap switch, and they turned the outside guy loose, and it was the easiest big play that Curtis Works ever. You know what's play I'm talking about? They're going left to right. I mean, it's like that's the kind of stuff where it's like you can't have those kind of mistakes, because they will make you pay. And that's the best part of having Curtis Work, is he is really smart. And if you make a mistake, he's going to find that guy, and he's going to get the ball out there, and he's going to hurt you. And you can't allow that to happen. Discipline in this game is so incredibly important in all phases, Trevor. And I would argue it's every bit as important as key number one, which is dominating up the middle. If not number one, you could make a case that this should be the very number one goal for this football team in this game, is you've got to be disciplined.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with everything that you had just said. The only other thing that I would add is being disciplined. The other thing that I would file under there is tackling well in space. That is something that Notre Dame has done extremely well all season long. When you go and you break down Indiana's offense, they have a bunch of guys that are really good after contact and after the catch. They have 2 running backs in Justice Ellison and Tyson Lawton, who they just don't go down. They're not shifty guys. They're not hurdling people. They just break tackles. And so you're going to have to bring your feet. You're going to have to form tackle. You're going to have, basically just put on a highlight reel of what Jaden Osbury did all season, and that's what the entire team is going to have to emulate, right? They have really shifty slot receivers. I think a lot of the attention goes to Elijah Surratt and Omar Cooper for their big play downfield ability, which rightfully so, but they have 3 guys in Miles Cross and Miles Price and Keyshawn Williams who they look to get very, very active in the screen game. Their offensive coordinator does a really good job of getting the football into their hands quickly, because good things happen when those 3 guys get the ball. They're very shifty. They're very quick. They run low to the ground. Like I said yesterday, they're kind of like a Jordan Faison, and they have 3 of them, and they're interchangeable, right? Sometimes when I was breaking down the film, I had a hard time figuring out the difference between Miles Price and Miles Cross. I know one of them's number 4 and one of them's 19, but they play very, very similar. So tackling well in space is going to be a must, because to your point, Brian, they do a really good job of capitalizing on other teams' mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And what's one of the biggest mistakes that teams make against Indiana is not tackling well in space. That's how they keep drives alive. That's how 2-yard gains turn into 8-yard gains. That's how 6-yard gains turn into 15-yard gains. So tackling well in space is going to be a must.
It's funny. It's. I hope that the Notre Dame players don't overlook Indiana the way Notre Dame fans are. And you talk, well, you're talking up Indiana. I'm not talking up Indiana. I don't need to talk up Indiana. Guys, we brag about how Notre Dame won 10 of their 11 games by at least 2 touchdowns. You know who else did that? Indiana. Matter of fact, actually, Notre Dame won 9 games by 2 touchdowns or more, 10 by double figures, right? Indiana won 10 of its 11 games by at least 2 touchdowns. They didn't do that by accident. They didn't do that just because other teams just didn't show up that day. And it's just by chance, everybody played their worst game against Indiana. That's not how they got here, folks, right? So I'm giving you an honest assessment of who this football team is. That doesn't mean, like, there's this thing that some have, like, you can't say that another team is good or somehow you take it as an insult to Notre Dame. No, Notre Dame's better than Indiana, but that doesn't mean Indiana also isn't really good. They are very good. I'm not talking up anyone. I'm giving you an honest assessment of how a team can rank in the top 10 in scoring offense and scoring defense and be 11-1 and be in the college football playoff. It's not about talking anyone up. It's about being honest and not trying to convince you every week that the opponent sucks so you can feel better about the game coming up. It's an honest assessment of who they are. It's a good football team, and that's why they require you to be disciplined, because if you're not, they're going to hurt you. Now, lucky for us, I think that Notre Dame players are going to look at Indiana a lot more like we do, and not how some people in the chat seem to be looking at Indiana, which is if they're Indiana. Guys, this is not 2023 and the previous 100 years before Indiana. This is a different football team. And you know what this team has that past teams never had? Portal success, because it wasn't around until 2 years ago. It's a good football team. So we'll see how that one plays. But the next one, Trev, these last couple two go together. Let's get these in together. Number one, you've got to get constant pressure on Curtis Rourke. Have to. And when you get to him, you've got to hit him and you got to take him down. Like Maryland, Northwestern, Nebraska, a little bit, not a ton, Michigan, those 3 teams had missed at least 5 or 6 chances in each game to get him down. One thing I saw in films, he's not overly mobile, but he's better at escaping sacks than people give him credit for. Not because he's an athletic guy, but he's smart. He'll see that pressure and just step up at the last second and make you miss. You stay on your track, and then boom, he just steps up and then you go by him. And he'll take off and he'll run every now and then, but more so what he does is, and this killed Northwestern, is he'll go step into the pocket, step back out, and then when your secondary comes up to tackle him, he just throws it right over their head for a big play. He has done that so many times in this game, in this season, where he'll step out of the pocket, you come up or lose somebody on and their receivers do a great job on scramble rules. Great job working open. And he'll find them. And you've got to be – so it's not just pressuring him, but it's pressuring him and make sure the ball gets out. Don't lose gap integrity. If you get to him, bring him down. If you can do that, and Ohio State did a great job of that after the first drive, and it completely shut Indiana down. But if you pressure him and he just slides out of the pocket and he gets free, he's either going to move the chains, or he's going to find somebody downfield for a big play. So you've got to pressure him early and often, get him out of rhythm. He is not a great quarterback out of rhythm because he doesn't have a great arm. He doesn't. He's a smart kid. He's an accurate kid. He's a great decision maker, but he doesn't have a big arm. And if you got him thrown off of his back foot, he's going to have a lot more incompletions. And then that ties into point 4, Trevor, which is get the ball. You're a great turnover defense. Get the ball. And he's been prone to early turnovers in the season. He threw 2 early picks against Maryland. You can do that against him in this game. This is going to be a fun night for Notre Dame, right? Get the ball. Knock it down. That includes knocking it down, tipping it, doing all those type of things. But also when those 3 or 4 potential turnover opportunities come up, you've got to get the ball. Michigan missed out on too many of those opportunities. Now, they had one where they picked them off inside the 10-yard line. They were coming out, picked them off inside the 10-yard line. They missed a couple other opportunities in that game, Trevor, that they could have got the ball, You can't miss on those opportunities, because if you give him second chances and third chances, he's going to hurt you. And so that's the big thing, is constant pressure on him, a lot of hits on him. And then when you get the opportunity to get your hands on the football, you've got to get your hands on the football. And when you get chances to pick the ball off, you've got to capitalize to pick the ball off. Those are my last two keys for the Notre Dame defense.
Yeah, and I think that the constant pressure on Rourke, the way that you described it, I think bleeds perfectly into stay disciplined. When you're rushing the passer, don't come in out of control, right? Because Rourke is a good guy at gap escaping. He's a good guy at stepping up into the pocket and just evading pressure. He's really good at evading pressure. I like, not necessarily escaping it. It's not like a guy has him and he just stiff arms him.
He's smart. He's savvy.
Yeah. And he buys himself more time because he's a 6-year player. He knows what kind of player that he is. That's what makes him so dangerous. So if you're going to get pressure on him, make sure that you come in under control, right? Still be violent at the point of attack, but come in under control, because there have been a good amount of times this year, especially with linebacker pressure, that I've seen it be ill-timed. And when it is on time, there have been times where they just go in and blow right by the quarterback because it's not under control. And then for turnovers, defensive line, when Rourke goes back to pass, hands up. You have 6'6" Riley Mills. You have 6'6", 6'7" Bryce Young, 6'4" Josh Burnham. Like, get active hands. When Gabe Rubio's in the game, he's a 6'5" guy. RJ Oben is 6'3". So, you're going to have opportunities for tip balls at the line of scrimmage. And then for defensive backs, active hands, man. Be active, head on a swivel, because there will be a couple of tip passes in this game, and Notre Dame has thrived on those. But no, constant pressure on Rourke and getting the football. Like I've said the past 2 weeks, there is a direct correlation with the amount of sacks and the amount of pressures that Curtis Rourke takes and the amount of turnovers that he's susceptible to. He's also been sacked a couple of times where he's lost the football. Now, I think he recovered 2 of the 3 between the Ohio State, Michigan, and Maryland game. But you will have very, very, I guess you like, not easy opportunities, but you will have several opportunities that when you are sacking the quarterback, make sure you see ball, get ball, that kind of mentality, because he will lose it in the pocket. So, and recovering fumbles hasn't been something that has been like an overall strength of this defense, I would say, because early on in the season, a lot of footballs were hitting the turf and not a lot of recoveries were going to the blue and gold.
Well, I think, what did they miss on their first 8?
Mm-hmm.
Right? I think their first 8 fumbles they did not get.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until Leonard Moore, and it wasn't until Jaden Alsbury recovered the Leonard Moore forced fumble against Louisville that Notre Dame recovered their first one. And so what's interesting about that, Trevor, is they started off 0 for 8, but they ended the season 11 for 25, which means they recovered 11 of their next 17 fumbles that hit the ground on offense or on defense and special teams. And so, you got to get the ball. You've got to continue what you did in the last 7 games and not what you did the first 5 or first 4, right? And so that is one of the weirdest stats I've ever seen, right? And it was like, I think it was 2 years ago, right? Was it 2022, Al Golden's first year, that Notre Dame had like a really bad rate of recovering fumbles? Yeah, they forced 12 and only recovered 5 in his first season. And they weren't great at forcing turnovers. Last year, they forced 24 fumbles and only recovered 8 of them last season. So Notre Dame finished, let's see here. Notre Dame was tied for 5th in the country in forced fumbles, and they ranked 44th in fumbles recovered, which is a wild stat. This year, Notre Dame ranks 3rd in forced fumbles, and they rank 8th in fumbles recovered. That's got to continue in this football game. No question about it. So we're going to see. I mean, look, here's the deal. This is a very well-coached, well-schemed, smart, veteran, experienced offensive football team. Notre Dame is much younger. They are far less experienced, but they're much faster and they're more physical. That's got to be what carries the day in this football game. You've got to be aggressive. You got to take the fight to Indiana. They're going to make some plays. Rebound from it. Go make a play the next day. They go off on a long play, Trevor, right? Because what are all these things built on? What is dominating up the middle? What is being disciplined? What is constant? It's limiting the big plays from the Indiana offense. They can't big play you to death. They big played Nebraska into oblivion in that football game. Maryland was hanging with them early, and then big plays, right? Michigan shut them down early. stop and go, bomb, Elijah Surratt with a touchdown, and they were in a little bit of trouble, right? They will big play you to death if you don't play discipline and don't do all those things. That's why you've got to be aggressive, take the fight to them, swarm to the football. If they go for a 40-yard gain, a 40-yard pass, that's fine. Tackle them at the 12. Don't let them score. Then you've got your shot to kind of keep them out of the end zone, which is hard against this team. And that's where situational football comes into play. But like all the things we talked about, that's what leads to third down success. That's what leads to limiting big plays. That's what leads to all the situational things we could have given you for keys to victory. Those things are what stop those things. Dominating up the middle, being disciplined, getting consistent pressure on the backfield. Because if you're doing things that are allowing you to get to Rourke all the time, you're most likely also doing those things in running downs, and you're getting the running backs off their track. Because if their running backs are getting downhill, I've always said this, Trev, you want a running back to make his first move at least 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage. Because running backs don't want to make moves behind the line of scrimmage. They want to press, get to that aiming point, and then make a cut down the field, right? And when we talk about Notre Dame running backs, a lot of their big plays, except that one by Jadarian against Purdue, they have come when they're making moves on guys 4 or 5 yards downfield or on the perimeter. When you're making moves behind the line of scrimmage, you've now declared, I'm going this way, and they can rally to the football. All those things play together into those things and are keys for the Notre Dame defense to shut down this very talented and potent Indiana offense. And is it the most talented offense they've played all year? No, it's not. USC's got more talent. Louisville's got more talent. None of them are as good as this Indiana team is, because I don't know if either one of those teams are as good as Indiana is up front. I think that's a big part of it. Neither of them are as good up front as what Indiana has been this season. And so you're going to have your hands full, but it's something I think this team can accomplish, Trev, if they have the right mindset and the right attitude.
Yeah, I mean, the only other thing that I'll add to keys is, and I've been preaching this for the last 2 weeks, win in the red zone on offense and defense, man. It's going to be a battle of, on offense, what's going to give first. IU's red zone defense hasn't been spectacular. Neither is Notre Dame's red zone offense. Complete and opposite storyline on the other side of the football. IU has scored more touchdowns in the red zone than any other team in college football by a lot. And Notre Dame does a really, really, really – they're a top 5 defense in the country in touchdowns allowed in the red zone. So once they get inside of the 20 – because, look, to Brian's point, everything that he's been leading up to, when you play this caliber of a team, once you get to the playoffs, it's not going to look like what Notre Dame's defense did to Stanford, okay? Like, it's just not. That IU is a really good football team. They are. It's every – you don't make the playoffs if you're not a good team, right? So – big plays are going to happen. IU is going to be able to drive down the field. Notre Dame's going to be able to drive down the field. It's not going to look like what happened in the regular season. As far as I'm concerned, both of these teams are 0-0, right? It's a new season, essentially. So if and when each team gets into the red zone, Notre Dame's going to have to win. That's going to be a huge key for me as well.
It's prediction time, Mr. Trowbridge. Let's get to it, man. So we've gone over the keys to victory and all the phases of the game here. Now it's time to give our predictions. So we are going to begin, as you all know, this is how we do it. We give our score prediction. We talk about how we think how we think the game is going to play out and what led us to that prediction. And then we will then hand out some game balls. And so Trevor will allow you to start off in this breakdown. Give me your score prediction, and then tell me how you think the game will play out.
Yeah, so my final score prediction for this one, I have 34-16 Notre Dame. And how I see the game playing out is going to be really close in the first 2 quarters. I believe it. And, there's been this trend all year of, the scoreboard doesn't really indicate how close or how not close the game was. And I think it's going to be a little bit similar to this. Like, I have Notre Dame winning by 18, and to some that might seem like a really steep margin, but I think the game is going to, if you watch it, look a lot closer than what it was. So Notre Dame's going to get Indiana's best shot in the first half. Like I said, this is a football team that is coached by a guy who, Kurt Cignetti is a guy that, he's the loudest guy on the block. And when you're a head coach of a team like Indiana's, you kind of have to be, right? You're taking over historically not a good football program. And so I've respected everything that he's done up to this point. And whenever he leads his team out on the field, he firmly believes that they have the best team out there. And you kind of have to have a little bit of that if you're going to be Indiana's head football coach. So I do think that Notre Dame is going to get Indiana's best shot early. And I could see it even being a little bit of something where it shocks them a little bit. Not to say that they're not going to be prepared. I don't think that Notre Dame is overlooking this team at all. But I think that sometimes it's just you see it in like boxing fights all the time. It's just like a team can land one good one on you. It's like kind of wakes you up a little bit. And I could see that in this game. So I have it being like a 14-10 game at halftime. But what history has shown us this year is Notre Dame is a really good second half defense. And once you give Al Golden time to go in and give him longer than just a series to go in and make adjustments, the defense is pretty locked down from there on out. So I have the final score being 34-16. I think it's a very consistent game for Notre Dame's offense. I see them not necessarily blowing it open, but it's just, a couple of methodical drives. They're keeping the defense off the field, Notre Dame's defense off the field. They're remaining fresh, and then they just put the game away, probably middle of the fourth quarter. And like I've said all season, this is a really hard defense to come back on. I think the pressure on Curtis Rourke is going to be the deciding factor here.
I've really had a tough time with this one, Trevor, because there's sometimes I'm watching film of Indiana and I'm like, Notre Dame's going to roll this team if they can just run the football. And then there's other times I'm like, man, this is going to be a battle. Like this team is really good. Just depends. I mean, there's times you watch Notre Dame this year, like, good Lord, this team is not that good. Not many times, but there's a couple times. But you get to the point where it's like, okay, at some point in time, you have to just look at how these two teams have played over the course of an entire season. And what this is two quality offenses that have two outstanding defenses. And so my prediction is going to be 27-17 Notre Dame or 28-17 is where I went with this one. Notre Dame scores 4 touchdowns. I think it's going to be a game, Trevor, that it's going to be similar to the Louisville game, except I think Notre Dame scores last. I think it's going to be like a 21-10 game. Like, it's 7-3. Notre Dame scores to make it 14-3. Indiana comes back and scores to make it 14-10. Maybe Indiana's up 10-7. Notre Dame goes up 14-10. Then they go up 21-10, and then Indiana comes back, makes it 21-17, and then Notre Dame's going to score one to kind of put it away, and then the defense makes a stop. I think this is going to be a quality football game. Is Notre Dame capable of blowing Indiana out like some of the predictions in the chat? Absolutely. It's hard to predict that because I've watched a lot of Indiana, and I'm like, this is a good football team. This is a really good football team, Trev. And but we've seen Notre Dame play good football teams and have the success that a lot of people in this chat are thinking. To your right, it's not going to be like the Stanford game. It's not going to be some 49-7 game where you're just toying with this team. It's not going to be that. I think it's a game that Notre Dame's a better team. They're at home. The matchups, I think, slightly favor Notre Dame, not from a personnel standpoint, but just from a, looking on paper, how they've been all season. I think Notre Dame's going to be able to do some things. And I'm watching film, and I'm like, boy, if that back had a little bit more juice, he might have been able to do something there. Well, Notre Dame has those backs. I don't think that Indiana's faced anybody quite like Riley Leonard this season from a running game standpoint. It's just going to come down to, can the Notre Dame players that need to step up? Can somebody outside, can a pass catcher step up? Can Christian Gray bounce back? Can the linebackers play well? Do your dudes up front play like dudes? I mean, those are all the question marks. And I think this is going to be a competitive football game. And Indiana fans are going to be like, well, if a play here goes differently, they'll have all that. But I think it's going to mostly be where just Notre Dame is a better football team. I just think they are. I think this is a good football team on both sides of the ball, that Notre Dame's facing. It's a very well-coached football team, but I just think Notre Dame is also a well-coached football team that just has better players. And that's why I have Notre Dame winning this game 28-17. So if the game plays out how you want it, how you think it's going to play out, Trevor, who's your offensive game ball winner?
So I've gone back and forth on this one because it's tough. We've talked a lot this week about Riley Leonard and how nobody's really IU's defense hasn't faced a guy like him. He's the, driver of the car. But honestly, man, in a game like this, it's hard for me to not go with Jeremiah Love. It really is, because he is a player that what every team has said after they get done playing Jeremiah Love is they say, hey, that dude is different. Players on Notre Dame's team say, I haven't seen players as electric as Jeremiah Love in my time being here. And I kind of just ended on the sentiment that we always talk about, Brian, and your dudes got to go out and be dudes. And when the lights are the brightest, who is that dude for Notre Dame's offense? And as much as I would love for it to be Mitchell Evans, and as much as I believe it could be Mitchell Evans or Riley Leonard or a Jaden Greathouse, Jeremiah Love, more times than not, has gone out and shown, even in the biggest environments. He and Jadarian Price took over that Texas A&M game, and it was very evident that he was the best football player on the field whenever he touched it. And so for me on offense, it's going to be Jeremiah Love, because I think that he is just a player that can go out and make things happen, man.
Everything you just said about Jeremiah Love, I 100% agree with, which is exactly why I don't think he'll be the player of the game for my prediction. It's because I think Indiana is going to focus so much attention on not letting him beat them that it's going to cost them with other players. Jadarian Price hits off a couple big runs, right? Mitchell Evans, somebody steps up. So I think that's going to be a big part of this one. I'm going with Riley Leonard. I think Mitchell Evans is going to have a big player too. I think a couple there. I don't know what it is, man. I just got this like a Jaden Greathouse, Jaden Harrison game type of vibe. I've said this. I've had it kind of all week. They're going to make some plays, but at the end of the day, it's going to be the guy getting the ball where it needs to get to. And I think Riley's going to make some big plays with his legs. I think that's going to be the difference. That was the difference against Texas A&M at times. It was a difference against Louisville at times. It was a difference in a lot of other games. It's helped spark them at other times. I think Riley Leonard is the guy I'm going with for my player of the game. A lot because of what you said. Indiana's going to be so focused on we can't let Ford beat us. We have not faced a guy like this all season. We got to make sure he doesn't beat us. That it's going to put Jadarian and Riley and some of those other guys in positions to make plays. And I think Riley's going to be the greatest beneficiary. I think he's going to make some. I don't know. He's going to throw the ball a ton in this game. Like I don't see Riley Leonard throwing the ball for 320 yards and 4 touchdowns or anything like that. It'd be nice if he did, but I just don't see it. But I think he's going to make some clutch throws in this game on top of running for 60, 70 yards. And, so like maybe throw for 220, run for 70, maybe throw for, 210, 200 or run for 70, something like that, Trev, where he just makes the plays that are needed for them to go out in there and win this football game. And so that's kind of how I see it.
Sure.
I don't think he's going to light him up, but I think that's how he's going to do it. Who's get your defensive game ball?
Defensive game ball for me is it's just going to be one of the two defensive tackles. I'll go with Howard Cross, kind of what I said yesterday for my game record prediction. Indiana's offensive line has struggled with athletic pass rushes, and that's what Howard Cross presents. I went either way. I will hear arguments out for both Howard Cross and Riley Mills. But to me, I think, this is his first game back playing football. I think he's a guy that just chomps at the bit when he's out and he's not able to go out and play and do what he loves the most. And he has the opportunity to go out and play in his final home game at Notre Dame Stadium, something he was not able to do against Virginia. And so I think this might mean a little bit of extra something to him on top of the magnitude of this game. But from a skill set perspective, I think he's a matchup along that Indiana offensive line. So defensively for me, getting pressure on Curtis Rourke is going to be huge. I think it's going to be coming up the middle with Howard Cross.
Yeah. For me, it's either Cross or Mills or Watts. I think it's going to be one of those three. I'm going Xavier Watts is going to be my pick because I just feel like he's going to be the beneficiary of it. It feels like a Xavier Watts game, which means it's going to be none of those guys. It's going to be a Christian Gray or a Jack Kaiser or a Junior Chilamaka or somebody like that's going to step up and make that play. We've got our guy Bill Bender with us today. Bill from Sporting News. Thank you so much, Bill. I know you are a very busy man today, but he said, hey, still going to make time for Irish Breakdown today. Bill, you and I are going to preview the other 3 playoff games here in a minute, but I wanted to bring you on and allow you to give your prediction and for this Notre Dame versus Indiana game and kind of how you see this game playing out. I know I believe you've seen Indiana live at least once this year, correct? If not twice.
I saw him at Ohio State.
Okay, so you've seen this team. What's your prediction, Bill? Talk to me about this game, how you see it playing out.
I think it's going to be close, but Notre Dame, if anything, Indiana might get like a backdoor cover. So Notre Dame keeps them. I put the final score at 28-24, which is covering. I'm fascinated to see how the weather plays into this. I'm fascinated to see if Indiana can block Notre Dame. Trevor's point taken right there on the interior. That's going to be huge. I'm fascinated to see if Curtis Rourke has time to throw and has a running game behind him. If he doesn't have a running game behind him, Notre Dame will roll in this game, and it won't be particularly close. But I think they will get a little bit of a running game with the time off. And I picture this game being a little bit like Notre Dame-Louisville was, where Notre Dame's the better team. Did you guys already say this? It's somebody's on mute.
See, it's my fault. I'm on mute this time. I said the same thing. I said, I think this is going to be a lot like Louisville. It's going to be a good game, two good football teams, but it's always going to be Louisville just trying to catch up to Notre Dame.
Maybe they get a backdoor score late. But I do think the Irish win this game. And Jeremiah Love, I know you guys probably talk about him a lot. The rest of the nation that hasn't paid enough attention to Notre Dame through this run is going to get a long look at him. I think he's the one guy, I've been saying this all week, that could really take off this weekend and become, oh my gosh, look at that guy. How does he average that many carries? He reminds me of how Notre Dame uses him, like Etienne was used at Clemson, where you're like, why doesn't this guy get the ball 30 times a game? Oh, wait, they're actually doing this right because they maximize his value. And Notre Dame wins this game. I'm excited about the atmosphere, the ticket prices you guys talked about. Did they say how much it's going to snow?
Now the snow's supposed to be out of there by the time the game comes. It's going to be mostly earlier in the day is what they're saying now.
That's too bad.
We'll get
I
some
would like to see it on the field, and if it has that feel of just an amazing game. But, and you guys could probably give me the temperature. I mean, I'm outside that bubble of – sounds like Indiana fans are chirping a little bit. They're feeling it.
Oh my gosh, Bill. It has been ridiculous.
I love it.
It's like, guys, you better hope your team wins because it's like this. Hey, we may never be here again. We're gonna get as much trash talking in as we possibly can. I was thinking that's gonna be nice. They're gonna just be kind of happy to be here, and they're just and we've actually had an Indiana fan in our chat all week, and he's been good. He thinks he actually predicted Notre Dame to win in a similar score to what you have. I think his was. Donald Schatz had it like 27-23. Notre Dame, he thinks it's going to be a good football game because he recognizes he's got a good football team he roots for. Some of the others are in sort of the, Notre Dame sucks and Notre Dame's not good and Notre Dame doesn't have anybody because I haven't seen them play a single game, but I know they lost to Northern Illinois and that's all I know, and I haven't watched them blow out every single team they've played. You get that nonsense, and they forget that they're Indiana. And, their schedule sucks. I'm like, listen, there's no one on the planet that should be talking about another team's strength of schedule less than Indiana, in Indiana fan.
Right.
But we're going to find out tomorrow night whether or not that chirping was justified or not. There's no doubt about that.
Well, I think Curt Cignetti, they take a cue from him. And I had said this, I don't know if I said this on this show. When I went to the Ohio State game, all of these things you guys have just said were like, dude, are you really picking a fight with Ohio State? Like, Ohio State hasn't lost to you since the 80s. And then afterward, Cignetti said all the things he did, and it always goes viral. And then afterward in his press conference, I was kind of listening to him. I was like, you know what? I understand what he's doing. He has to be a little outspoken. Has to. Yep. But in the press conference afterward, he was like, no, he went through all the reasons they lost. He had a couple barbs in there about the refs, but everything was very, yeah, this isn't the Curt Cignetti that's portrayed on social media. That you can see kind of, okay, I get why these guys follow him.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's enough to beat Notre Dame, but
it's why they're here, Bill. If he doesn't have this supreme confidence that, hey, we're better than, like, Indiana players think that they're better than some of them are.
Oh,
and that's why they're here. That's why they beat all the teams they beat, because they didn't buy into we're Indiana. They said, no. We're Indiana, but that doesn't mean what you think it means.
Yeah.
And that's why they're here.
Trevor, what did you predict?
I had 34-16, close game at halftime, and Notre Dame's defense just kind of shuts it down towards middle of the third quarter. And
I think you said like a 14-14.
Yeah, 14-10
game at halftime,
14-10
something like
at
that.
half.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That'll be exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I went 28-17, Bill. I had it where Indiana just keeps kind of, and then they score second half to make it 21-17, and then Notre Dame puts one on late, and then they stop them on their final drive, and that's how it came down to it. So I think we all see the game somewhat similarly.
Yeah.
It's going to be a close game for a while.
Mm-hmm.
The home team that's just, has more experience in these big game up situations is the one that I think carries the day in the fourth quarter.
Yep.
So Trevor, my man, good stuff today. Appreciate you. I will see you tomorrow at the IB tailgate. We're going to get started here, folks, tomorrow around 1 o'clock. Trevor will be there. I'll be there. Mom's making a ton of food. They're actually going to be here in the next couple hours. She's going to start all the prep. She's going to make a lot of good stuff. I'm going to make my chili. We're going to have some cocoa, some coffee, some cold drinks. I got to have my Mountain Dew. It doesn't matter what the weather is, man. I got to have my Mountain Dew. So it's going to be a lot of fun, Trev. I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for being with us on the Irish Breakdown podcast. So, Mr. Bender, Notre Dame game obviously is going to be a big one. It's going to be the first one, but on Saturday, there's 3 more big games as we get into the college football playoff and we get into finding out who is who. I think I've said this, Bill, before we start about the games. I don't know that we necessarily know as much about the teams in the playoffs this year as we have in the past. You felt like a lot of years, like we knew who Michigan was last year. We knew who Washington was last year. Maybe we didn't know as much about Bama or Texas, but we knew about those 2 teams. You go back to 2018 when Notre Dame made the playoff, and we knew who those 4 teams were, and you knew they were clearly the best of the best. They were the ones that belonged. I don't know that we know as much for a host of reasons, not as much out of conference action by some of the top teams in the league against other top teams. And Ohio State didn't necessarily have a great out of conference record, and Oregon didn't, they had their Boise game, and Arizona State, Texas was, everybody's kind of down on Texas because they've only watched Texas play against Georgia.
Right.
I don't know that we know a lot of these teams. And honestly, not a lot of these teams enter the playoff on fire. Even Notre Dame, who's won 10 in a row, had a kind of an ugly win to end the season. I think you could argue the hottest team coming into the postseason right now is Arizona State right now. It's going to make for a very fascinating first round, Bill, because obviously Penn State lost their most recent game. Texas lost their most recent game. Notre Dame kind of had an ugly win at the end of their most recent game. Indiana lost their second to last game of the regular season. Clemson lost their last game of the regular season before winning the ACC championship. So I think that's going to make for a very interesting first round, but also can make it a little bit kind of hard to judge because we don't have a lot of data points that can compare the leagues that are playing each other and some of the different matchups in this game. What are your thoughts on that, Bill?
Agree. There's 2 teams in the first round that I think could win it all, and it's probably not the answers you would expect. I think it's Notre Dame, depending on how, they got to get past this first one. And I think it's Ohio State because I think they have enough talent to beat everybody. I'm not sure Texas can get through an Oregon with some of the questions I have about Quinn Ewers and this offense being inconsistent. And I think Ohio State, we'll get to that game shortly, but I could see them winning by 20 points, and I could see them losing and wanting to publicly fire Ryan Day in the courthouse square on Sunday morning. Both of those are equally feasible outcomes. I think what this first round needs, and what I've talked to Churchy about this on the podcast yesterday, he disagrees. I was making fun of Bill and Mike this week, DeCourcy. I kind of call him like the sunshine news because everything in college football is great according to them, and it's going to be awesome. But what if these games all are terrible?
Yeah.
That fear exists, that all of these games are blowouts, and it's not out of the question. And it's going up against the NFL, and it's on TNT, and the first round could flop.
Yeah.
I don't think it will, but it could.
The TNT aspect of it would concern me a little bit because it's the noon and the 4 are both on TNT, correct? And then the Ohio State game is on ABC, ESPN.
Ohio State and Notre Dame games will do fine.
Yeah,
they're fine. The other 2, I'm like, yeah, I know where TNT is because we still watch Law and Order to make sure we
gotta
but
have that.
Not everybody watches Law and Order.
Right.
So,
and TNT is not on YouTube TV, on Fubo TV. So, not all the streaming services even have TNT anymore. It is on YouTube TV. It's not on Fubo TV.
That's a problem.
Because Vince was complaining about that the other day because he has Fubo. But what you're seeing now is they're saying that Penn State might not sell out, might not have a full crowd there. It's going to be interesting, Bill. And what I agree. I have 3 teams capable of winning it from the first round. I do think Texas is capable. They're the ones most dependent upon the draw,
correct,
in my opinion, than maybe some of these other teams are. But I could also see all 3 of those teams getting bounced in the first round.
Yeah.
Because as I said, the one thing that we should all be able to agree on, there's no elite dominant team like we have seen in past years. There's no 21 Georgia. There's no 20 Bama. There's no 19 LSU. There's no 18 Clemson. I've said I think the top 4 seeds or all teams in the 18 playoff could win it this year, if not be heavily favored to win it this year, with Notre Dame maybe being the one exception. but that Kyler Murray Oklahoma team would be very hard to beat in this version of college football right now. And, of course, Alabama and Clemson would be unstoppable in this version of college football with the portal and all those type of things. And I don't know that you're going to see teams like that anymore where you have those type of teams. So let's dive into the matchups, Bill, and we're going to just kind of go in order, chronological order, and let's talk about this noon game because I think it's interesting that a lot of people – I believe Penn State has the easiest draw through the first 2 rounds, but I don't believe that they're a team capable of winning it all. We're going to find out a lot about Penn State in this ball game because I think this is a good SMU football team. SMU comes in 11-2. Penn State comes in 11-2. The Nittany Lions are 8.5-point favorite. Game is going to be at noon on TNT. Bill, what are your thoughts on this matchup?
I think the home crowd will matter. This is SMU. This isn't playing at whatever the ACC road venues they played at were. I think they caught Duke on the road. I don't even know. I should know. I know they played Florida State at SMU, so they didn't
played Louisville on the road. Also,
that's not a bad one.
That was a noon game. And Louisville, I think, was coming off of the Notre Dame game.
That is not Beaver Stadium.
No,
and I think it is so imperative for SMU to get off to a fast start here. Now, Thomas Lammers, the comment: "We are due for James Franklin to James Franklin." On that note, I will not be surprised if one of those alerts really early, 10-0 SMU, right out of the go.
Yeah.
Like they hit a big play, Jennings hits, Brashard Smith on a screen, missed tackle. It's 10-0 SMU. Holy cow. What's going on to Penn State? I can't see them winning this football game. I think that Penn State defense with Abdul Carter, that front 7 will be disruptive. Clemson had better players than SMU, and it showed. Penn State has better players than Clemson. Maybe not by much, but they have more difference maker players than Clemson does, and namely Abdul Carter, Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, Tyler Warren. They have those guys.
I think that for Penn State, the thing that they have working for them is they don't need to run the football to score on
Correct.
SMU. Because the one thing that I think a lot of people – I was talking to a buddy of mine last night. He's like, I think Penn State's going to bully SMU. I was like, you haven't watched SMU play this year, have you?
They can play. They can.
Their
stop the run.
D-line will not get bullied. They can shut down the run. The issue is I think there's some other issues on the perimeter that they're not quite on that level, and we saw that. And the reality is the Clemson game was an odd game because it was SMU's own mistakes that led to Clemson jumping on them 14-0. And once they eliminated those, then they kind of crawled back. But Clemson, to me, is they are the team I would be most shocked by, not only winning in the first round, but winning it all. I think they're the team that has the least chance, including Iowa State, Arizona State, including Boise State. I think Clemson has the least chance because this is just not a great football team, Bill. It just really isn't. And they had a great first quarter against SMU, and then SMU pretty much dominated the final 2 quarters of that football game, and then couldn't close it out. The Penn State, to me, could fall behind early. I think what it really boils down to is I like this SMU football team a lot, Bill. I just don't think they're going to be able to handle that Penn State front 4. And it's not just Abdul Carter. I mean, he's obviously the one that's going to have an impact when it comes to the passing game. But I think up the middle, that's another big difference for Penn State is they're a team that can hurt you up the middle with Zane Durant. He's a good football player. Kobe King has turned into a pretty quality linebacker. Tony Rojas is a quality linebacker. Keziah Izzard is a pretty good football player. I think that they're going to be able to do up the middle what a lot of teams haven't been able to do against SMU because there's just not a lot of good interior big guys in the ACC that can exploit some of SMU's weaknesses up the middle. Clemson did a little bit early. I think Penn State will be able to do the same thing. I do think that SMU speed will allow them to stay in this game. But I think at the end of the day, I think Penn State just has too many weapons. And then just matchup-wise, I think their tackles are going to have a really tough time with Abdul Carter.
And they've only lost 1 game when they're favored the last 3 years. So James Franklin doesn't James Franklin
in this kind of game.
When James Franklin is favored at home. He hasn't done that in a long time, actually. Their only loss as the favorite was Ole Miss in the bowl game, and that was on a neutral field in the South. So it's kind of like a business-like win. It will feel like them beating Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
I got them winning 31-20. I think it could be worse. And that's not to say SMU won't put up a fight or could throw a scare on them, but the tempo has to work. And on the road, elements are going to be in play there too.
That's
It sounds
a big
like
one.
sounds like the weather's going to be crap.
Yeah.
And out there, when the weather's crap, it just looks different on TV. I've experienced it a few times. That's rough go for a team from Texas.
That's a big part of it. I don't know that SMU is going to be able to take it. I actually think SMU has a speed advantage on the perimeter against Penn State. I do. Not quite like Oregon did. And that's the one thing that we talked about in our preview of the Oregon game is the reason I thought Penn State would struggle is this is not a typical Penn State secondary where every year Penn State has these really athletic guys in the secondary. You can take advantage of that, of their secondary, if you can protect the quarterback. I think they're not going to be able to protect the quarterback, but I think the elements are also going to slow that aspect of what SMU wants to do down. And they're not going to be able to take advantage of it like they did against Clemson in the second half of that game, like they did against Louisville and games like that. So I think that is going to hurt them. I think they're going to be balanced enough, Bill, to keep this a game. I have it 27-21, but in a game that is a competitive game, but one you never actually think Penn State's going to lose. So I have it 27-21. I can see SMU pulling off the upset if they can get to Drew Aller. I just don't know that they have the kind of pressure to do that. I think they're going to have to heat him up to get to him, and that's where they get burned. Tyler Warren, Singleton out of the backfield, things like that, where they're going to beat your blitz with something like that, and they're just going to big play you to death. So I think that's ultimately why I think if I were to miss on this, I think I'm going to miss, like you said, Bill, I'm going to miss that it's not as close as I have it. I think SMU can win if they were playing on a neutral field weather-wise.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that they're going to be able to go up north and prepare for that.
So far we disagree as far as the spread on both games.
But we see it playing out.
But we see the same kind of game.
Yeah.
So I just think Penn State, and we do know if Penn State has a chance to tack one on late, they absolutely will. It just might not be Bro Pribula running it in this time.
Won't be that. And I don't think that's going to hurt them a lot. I think you've got Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton and Tyler Warren. You're going to be fine. You just have to game plan appropriately. So let's get to game number 2, Bill. This is going to be at 4:00, also at on TNT. That is number 5 seed Texas hosting number 12 seed Clemson. The Longhorns are a 12-point favorite, over under 51.5. Clemson got in by winning the ACC championship, despite finishing the season 9-3. Got in because 2 of those 3 losses were SEC losses and not ACC losses. They played 2 teams that finished with a sub 500, above 500 record in ACC play. They lost to one of them. The other one, they needed a walk-off touchdown by Cade Klubnik to win. That was against Pitt. To me, the least impressive team in the playoff, but it's still Clemson. Mm-hmm. It's still Dabo. And that's what makes this interesting. And Texas is kind of limping into this game a little bit, Bill, physically, and then I think a bit mentally, which makes this an intriguing matchup. In my opinion, I want to hear what you think about this game, Bill, how you see it playing out, and then, of course, we'll get your prediction at the end of it.
Dabo's been there and done that. He's coached in 4 championship games. He's coached against an Alabama team that had Tua and an NFL receiving core. He's coached against that LSU team with Joe Burrow and 2 Hall of Fame receivers and Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. He's coached in those environments. So this isn't too big for him. It's going to be tough. If Texas is running the ball early, as simple as it sounds with Wisner, and getting what they want in the running game, Clemson will get blown out.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what happened against Louisville. Louisville just pounded them in Clemson. Georgia pounded them in the second half. It was tight for a half. If Quinn Ewers makes mistakes, Quinn Ewers is so interesting this week. We're talking about his future as if it's written in stone. He's going to be in the NFL. He's not going to be a first-round pick. He's going to be a transfer. If he does, he may end up at a Big Ten school. I mean, he'll have suitors for sure. And I don't know, because I think it's a given that Arch Manning will play and be Texas's starter next year, as of now. So that's kind of a distraction. Mm-hmm. But I think the Longhorns get through it. Their defense is difference here. Their front is active. Anthony Hill's a beast. Jahdae Barron, if Xavier Watts isn't the best defensive player in the country, then it's Jahdae Barron, in my opinion. Guy's always around the football, makes big plays. And they're at home. And I think they're just flat out better than Clemson. And they've showed that this year, even if they haven't shown it against like frontline teams.
Two things to say in response to that. Number one is you're correct. They haven't shown against frontline teams. Clemson's not a frontline team. I think we would both agree on that. They're not a frontline team. Yeah, they're in the playoff, but they're not Georgia. They're not that type of team. And then the thing you said before that is what makes Texas upset proof as you can possibly be in a playoff game, because no one's upset proof, is this Texas team has a much better defense than past Texas teams.
Correct.
So even if the offense struggles, you're going to have a tougher time scoring on this Texas team than maybe some other teams had. And I don't know that Clemson has what it takes. And one of the biggest disappointments for me this year with Clemson has been their defensive line, which I thought was going to be really good coming into the season with Peter Woods and Capehart up them, and the big old kid. You've got I'm drawing a complete blank on the other edge player, the sophomore stud defensive tackle they had, TJ Parker. Yes, Tamorian Parker. You've got talented linebackers and Barrett Carter and Wade Woodaz and the stud freshman Sammy Brown. You'd think this team would be better on defense, and they just haven't been. I mean, this team this is what I thought was going to fuel the Clemson team this year, was a really good defense, and they just haven't been. And their rush defense has been a big part of it. Now, here's the interesting thing, though, Bill. Teams that have rushed on them have primarily been teams with mobile quarterbacks. Stanford ran all over them, and that was with Ashton Daniels. They gave up over 288 yards to Citadel, who's an option team. They gave up 267 to South Carolina, a lot of that because of Lenore Sellers. SMU went for 154, but it was only 4.4 per carry. NC State ran on them, but a lot of that was late in the game with a mobile quarterback. Georgia didn't run incredibly well on them, had a couple big plays. Texas doesn't have that kind of quarterback. They're more of a traditional run game. So will they shut them down like they did Florida State and Wake Forest and Virginia Tech and Pittsburgh, or will they get bullied like Louisville did to them? And that's going to come down to Steve Sarkisian. If he coaches the run game like he did against Georgia, he was afraid to run at Georgia, and so everything was east-west, then Clemson will have some success slowing them down, and it'll be a much lower scoring game. If he's more willing, hopefully they get Kelvin Banks back. If he's more willing to kind of be more aggressive running downhill with their run game, then I think they'll be able to have some success in this football game. But I just, at the end of the day, I don't think Clemson is going to be able to score enough with a very young receiving core and an offensive line that's just been okay to win this game. And I think you saw in the second half of the game last week, once SMU kind of caught up to the moment, Clemson didn't have a lot of answers for them. And I think Texas has been here before. They were in the playoff last year. The moment's not going to be too big for them. This game, I just think Clemson's going to have a very hard time in this game. What's your score prediction for this one, Bill?
I had Texas 31, Clemson 17.
Really?
Is that what you have?
Yes, it is.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have it 31-17. I think I went 34-17 in a show we did last weekend, but I think I said what I said originally is I went 35-17, but I think Clemson's going to make enough stops to where I went down to 31 because it's going to be a couple field goals instead of 5 touchdowns. So they'll get 4 touchdowns and a field goal instead of 5 touchdowns. So 5 scores, but this way there's just, one where they hold them to a field goal. And I don't know that it's going to be overly. I think it's going to be the ugliest of the first round games.
I agree.
I think it's going to be the most boring, ugly of the first round games. I don't think Texas is going to look great in the win. I think to your point, you said at the very end, Bill, they're just a lot better than Clemson. And Clemson hasn't looked good against this caliber opponent really all season.
I think, and guy, keep an eye on Andrew Makuba, Clemson transfer in that Texas secondary. Their secondary is really good. So Clubbeck will make some mistakes. They'll turn it on in the second half. I don't know that Ewers will play great. He'll probably just he'll have one of his lines. It's like, oh, yeah, that's not bad. And their big play receivers will make some plays. I don't know how much Arch will play. I don't care. Bill Trocchi, my editor and my partner in the other podcast, he is dying to see Arch play. And I keep
been talking about Arch all year.
Oh, he's been talking about him all year and wanting to see him. And I keep telling him it's not happening until next year. It's like that Mean Girls reference. Fetch is not going to happen. It's not. Is that what they say?
I don't know. I keep telling you this. I've never seen that movie.
I think that's what they say in that movie. I've heard the reference enough times, but it's not. Arch is not happening this year. Maybe next year. But I like Texas pretty convincingly to the point it was like I will probably be traveling to the shoe during the first half of this game, and I'm pretty confident when I get in the press box, it's going to be like, nothing to see here. It's just Texas moves on.
So, Bill, let's get to the big game of day 2. And I think this is going to be by far the best game of day 2. As far as it depends. We'll see. But it's the biggest matchup of day 2 of the first round. That's number 8 Ohio State hosting number 9 Tennessee. A lot going on in social media about it's going to be, Tennessee is going to take over the stadium and do to them what other teams have done to Notre Dame and all these different things. And Ohio State goes into this game as a 7.5-point favorite, which I actually was a little surprised that the spread was that big and hasn't moved at all. Over under 45.5, I think, is the most solid sound over under of all the first round games. I was shocked that Indiana Notre Dame was 52.5 when you consider how good these two defenses are. I think this one is a little bit more realistic. Buckeyes looking to get back on track. Tennessee looking to keep rolling. I thought Tennessee ended the season probably with one of their best performances of the last 2 months, falling behind Vanderbilt 17-0 and just rolling Vanderbilt in the final 3 quarters. Buckeyes coming off of a 13-10 loss to Michigan. Very interesting game, and there's a lot to talk about in this one, even beyond just the matchup, because of all of the stuff around Ryan Day and the heat that is on his seat. There's no coach, in my opinion, that is on a bigger must-win situation in round 1 than Ryan Day.
Oh, there's no team. The reaction either way is huge this week. It's either Ohio State wins and, we're going to go beat Oregon. We're the national champs. We're over the Michigan thing. Or I just don't know how – I can't even picture Sunday morning here in Columbus. I'm in Pickerington, south of, if they lose. And here's a couple things going on in Central Ohio right now. I'm getting at least 1 or 2 texts a day about – it's like, where's Waldo? Hey, man, there are Tennessee fans in the BW3s outside Lane Avenue, and they're playing Rocky Top. And I'm like – they'll do that. Hey, I'm at a sports bar in Worthington, and there's a bunch of Tennessee orange in here. And how much is going to be in the stadium, Bill? I've never seen Ohio State overrun, ever. I've seen Michigan overrun with Ohio State fans during the Brady Hoke years. I think they'll be – I always go lower than what people say. So people are saying this is going to be 70-30. No way.
For Ohio State?
Yeah, in the stadium. Okay. I'm saying at most it's 15 to 20% Tennessee. And if it's more than that, I'll be shocked. There were a lot of Texas fans at the Michigan game earlier this year. So I think some of it is that experience. If you're a Tennessee fan, I've never been to the shoe. I've been to Tuscaloosa. I've been to the Swamp. I've been to Tiger Stadium. I've never been here. So the ticket gate thing is interesting. The potential, the Michigan hangover is very real. And I've explained it on this show and other shows, and finally got Bill Trocchi to believe me here. They would rather beat Michigan than win at all. 6 out of 10 Ohio State fans would rather beat Michigan than win the national title. And this national title, I think this is the big psych test. Will they feel that way if they win on Saturday? Right. Or will Michigan be done? So I'm interested in that part. I'm interested in the mood of the stadium. I mentioned the anxiety in that stadium the last 3 times I went in there. Is the anxiety gone because the worst is over? Yeah. The worst thing that could have possibly happened was losing to Michigan. It happened. What happens next? I mean, those are my initial just thoughts. And I can't fathom them firing Ryan Day. But I can't. Now I'm starting to think, well, if they lose, it's going to get very toxic here very fast.
Just depend on what candidates are out there or not. That would be the interesting thing. Here's where I'm at, Bill, and here's my big question about that part. Because what I said in our preview on Saturday was the result for Ohio State is going to be determined how they mentally handle all the distractions. Is it become fuel for them to say us against the world? If they do, they're going to play great. If it isn't, then they're going to struggle and potentially likely lose this football game. But Ohio State's been here before. People forget it. 2 years ago, Ohio State got blown out in the second half against Michigan in 2022 at home. And that Ohio State team, if they win that game, they were undefeated. They're playing for a national championship.
And they would have
And
beat TCU.
And they backed into the playoffs because Tennessee got beat late, Clemson got beat late, USC choked away in the Pac-12 title game, and then they went out and almost beat Georgia, 42-41, who won the title that year. I mean, now here's the question. Will Howard's not C.J. Stroud, and C.J. Stroud was Superman that day. But the thing is, like, this is not an Ohio State team that all of a sudden just doesn't have talent. They don't all of a sudden not have Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka and Caleb Downs and Denzel Burke and and the players they have. It's really comes down to where they are mentally with all this stuff going on. I think that's going to be a huge part of like, it's not just about the on paper on field matchup, Bill. It's where's their psyche.
Oh, it's huge. And that first drive, that first grumble, if they go 3 and out and Will Howard throws one in the dirt, if they don't, if Tennessee comes right out and it's 8 plays and 125 yards or 8 plays, 80 yards, Nico throws a touchdown to Thornton, it's 7-0. That place will be right back in the anxiety mode. And Will Howard's such a key player in this. You mentioned that Georgia-Ohio State game. That Ohio State team had C.J. Stroud at quarterback. First-round talent. He's struggling a little bit this year, but still. Will Howard's not that. Will Howard's the guy under the gun this game, to me. And the coaching staff, because are you going to play into Tennessee? They just totally botched the Michigan game plan to the point that it's still being talked about. Use your receivers. Use those guys that play on Sunday that have mismatches on the perimeter and set your running game up that way. Do not play right at Tennessee or you're in trouble, because they're pretty good up front too. And they've got a good edge.
Michigan's front seven was good. Wait to get a rested Tennessee front seven.
They're better.
Yeah.
Up front. And I seldom agree with you about, they're maybe not better at defensive tackle, but they're better everywhere else.
I'm talking as a front seven unit.
Correct.
There's James Pierce and Mason Graham are the 2 best individual players of that group. And Kenneth Grant's in the conversation for in that top group as well. But as an entire unit, Tennessee is better than what Michigan is.
I agree. And then on the other end of it, the on-field test, and this is a real thing. It's not just something we cook up and talk about. It's going to be 20 degrees. Nico Iamaleava said he played in a 7-on-7 in Chicago. He didn't play on one in the week before Christmas. It is cold weather quarterback.
April cold in Chicago is not December cold in Central Ohio.
I think cold weather matters at quarterback.
Yeah.
And I say that because I've listened to Bengals fans complain about Carson Palmer for years when it got cold here. And it is a thing with the Miami Dolphins. And it is a thing if Nico, and he's up against a really physical defense that actually played very well in that Michigan game with the exception of like 3 plays. So, yeah, I mean, can Dylan Sampson get going?
Yeah.
I just, out of the 4 games, I got a pretty good feeling of like how that first quarter is going to go in the first 3. This one, I have no idea. That's what makes it so interesting.
I look at it like this, Bill. It's going to be a hard-fought, low-ish scoring game that Ohio State wins if they're locked in. The thing about Tennessee that I was having the same friend of mine that was talking about what I had mentioned earlier with Penn State was talking about how, I don't know if Ohio State's defense is going to be able to stop Tennessee. So, what are you talking about? He's like, that's a really good offense. I'm like, have you not watched Tennessee play since the NC State game? Because this is not a high explosive. But the Dylan Sampson's so good. Yeah, Dylan Sampson's a heck of a player, but they don't score.
They're grinding.
Yeah.
They to grind it out.
Very much. I mean, since the Kent State game, and they had 71, they scored 25, 14, 23, 24, 28, 33 against Mississippi State, 17 in the loss to Georgia. They scored 56 against UTEP, and then 36 against Vanderbilt, who, lost like 4 of their last 5 games of the season. And this is not a high-octane 2022 Hendon Hooker-led Tennessee offense. This is a physical, grinded-out football team, which I think is probably good for Ohio State because they're just not going to come out and just speed them and tempo to death and jump on them 14-0 most likely, because they're going to kind of play into the strength of Ohio State as well. It's going to come down to can guys like Dante Thornton make some big plays down the field against this Ohio State defense like Oregon did?
He's the guy that I said was the key player for Tennessee, because if they can show that they can take the top off
that's when Ohio State could get in trouble.
Yep, because then they got to account for the whole SEC speed thing.
Yep. And now Caleb Downs is having to work backwards to defend over top and not coming downhill to add an extra hat against Dylan Sampson.
So Nico's the key player. Can Nico battle? I don't know. I didn't check the wind. I know it's supposed to be cold. I know I hate cold weather. And you seem like a guy that likes cold weather. You
No,
I hate it. I hate it.
It doesn't bother me. Like I don't get cold, super cold. Like I actually kind of usually stay warm, but no, I don't like cold. I play quarterback, Bill. I don't like cold weather.
Yeah, I don't like it. Doesn't like impair me by any means. I just don't like it. And I would rather it be. I always tell my kids I'd rather it be 85 than 15, and I'd rather it be 90 than 10. I can live with that. But okay, well, let's do this part. Tennessee. Before we do our predictions, let's do this part. Tennessee wins. What's Sunday morning like here? You tell me as an outsider. I'm in the middle.
Well, I mean, I grew up in Ohio, so I mean, all my family are Ohio State. So it's going to be
what happens Sunday morning
from the fan base. Ryan Day's got to go.
What's Tennessee wins 27-17.
So it's. I'm tell you in a minute why I think it's funny you say that. I think it's Ryan Day has to go. I mean, now, will the administration listen to that? I don't know. I worry for Ohio State, looking at it I worry for Ryan Day. Not that I worry, but like my concern would be if I'm him or the supporters of him, that it becomes so toxic that he'll never be able to kind of draw in the coaches and players needed, because you get to almost like what Auburn did to Gus Malzahn when they first turned on him. It became so toxic that even though the administration kept holding on to him, and he'd do just enough to keep his job, he couldn't get the kind of assistance you'd want. He'd miss out on some recruits because, like, I don't know that you're going to be here that long. You know what I mean? Like, I think, you may get fired, and so that may not hurt him in the portal for the 1-year rentals, but high school recruiting could hurt him. Going out and hiring the assistants you need, like, hey, I don't want to hitch my wagon to that thing, and the next thing you know, you're fired in a year. I think it can become the sort of toxic type of environment, and as you and I both know, Bill, once Ohio State fans turn on you, I don't know that there's a whole lot you can do to change them short of beating Michigan by 30 and winning the national title next year.
Well, and here it is. It's in Central Ohio. See, Jack French is on the chat here. We talk about Ohio State football every day. Every day in everyday conversation, Ohio State football comes up, and especially in the summer when you're running around on all these fields like I am with my daughter and my son. Just got an email about lacrosse season starting. I'm like, that's not for a while, I hope. But point being, the dads out there want to know about Ohio State. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be the most toxic summer ever because he's got to beat Michigan. And it's so far, they open with Texas. Forget about Michigan. They open with Texas. And there's a couple of people in the chat here as well mentioning Mike Vrabel's name. That is very real right now from the standpoint of, I'm not saying I have any like inside knowledge, but Mike Vrabel has a choice. If Mike Vrabel came out today and said on Sunday morning, said, I'm not going to coach in the NFL this year, that would get everybody's. I'm definitely not coaching the Bears, or the Cowboys, or the Patriots, or whoever.
Right.
Ohio State fans want him right now.
Right.
Would he do? I mean, we just watched Bill Belichick get hired, so don't tell me that guy can't recruit or doesn't want NIL. The guy has a lot of passion for Ohio State football. There's no doubt. And he's got that tough guy persona that he doesn't have to fake that.
It's Ohio State. He'll recruit fine.
Yeah, he doesn't have to fake being tough. Yeah, right. He's a tough guy. He lived that. We saw it on TV for years. And then for them, it would just be so toxic. So it's like almost to me, it's like if Ryan Day loses this game, is it better to just kind of, I'm going to go be the Bears offensive coordinator, or I'm going to go do this. I thought like North Carolina would have been a great landing spot had he chose to leave. Like, I'll just go coach down here. It's a demotion. I get it, but I'm done with, maybe in Ryan Day's head, I'm done with these Ohio State fans. I got a winning percentage of whatever it is. Yeah, I lost a couple Michigan games, but that's what's on the line here. And I can't think of who else. Like Marcus Freeman, not happening.
He just signed an extension. Yeah,
he just signed $90 million. Not happening. Brian Hartline, not happening. They're not hiring. They're not going to do what they did with Ryan Day and hire somebody who's never been a head coach.
Right.
Not going to happen.
Is there any talk in there about Chip Kelly?
It's an option, I suppose, because he's done it before. But I mean, people aren't real thrilled with him right now because he ran inside tackle plays against Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham for 4 hours a couple weeks ago. I think it's another thing I taught Troche, has to be a guy from Ohio. Whether that's right or wrong, will be a guy from Ohio.
look at the two coaches that have had success. The last two coaches that have actually had success at Ohio State.
Because immediately, right when Day was hired, he was looked at. He doesn't get it. He's an outsider. That's wrong to think that way in 2024. But because I've lived here and watched Day and Cooper was an outsider.
It is, but it isn't. Like, and here's what I mean by that, Bill, is like, look, the three championship coaches at Ohio State, Woody Hayes, Urban Meyer, and Jim Tressel, I believe, were all born in Ohio, or at least
Ohio guys,
right? What I have found with some of these guys like a Ryan Day-ish and Chip Kelly's, that they don't recruit Ohio the way that they need to recruit Ohio. And what has happened in the last 4 or 5 years is Michigan's getting some of those guys, and so you're seeing Michigan being more of the blue collar team, and Ohio State's this athletic team, and you also have to find someone that understands you play in Columbus, Ohio, and when Tennessee comes from now again, Tennessee's not South Georgia weather-wise. It's not, Central Texas weather-wise, but it's not Northern Ohio either. When they come up to your stadium in December and the weather better suits their style of play than yours,
that's a problem.
That's a problem.
It is. It is. And Michigan, over the years, several of arguably their two best players of my lifetime are Ohio guys. Charles Woodson and Desmond Howard. So, It's very real. And I think, the Ohio thing, Urban, Tressel, Woody, that the Ohio State thing was understood. It didn't have to be like Jim Tressel was never, I don't remember a press conference other than that first one where he was like over the top talking about Michigan. Meyer would call him our rival and do little things like that. And that's the other one. Like, crazy as it sounds. Okay, so you go down this list of coaches. Then you're left with like Luke Fickell and Matt Campbell. Neither one of those are happening. So you're down to, if you fire Ryan Day and Mike Vrabel doesn't happen, then you are left with this scenario, which I think could happen, is Urban Meyer comes back. And I know he put out a statement on Twitter and said he's not interested, but I also know he's 60 years old, 7-0, has an ego, could be the savior.
Yeah.
All those things.
He's saying the right things now to support his former assistant. But you and I both know if Ryan Day was not there anymore, that story changes.
By a lot. And the thing with Zach Smith, and it's not a thing, I'm not understating it, the mishandling, the sexual assault, misconduct accusations, that's major. That may prevent the university from going back down that road, and that's a very real possibility. But I just, if Ryan Day were to leave and they were like Tuesday, Ryan Day's done, the first name I would think of is probably Urban.
I would think they would have to kind of get turned down by a few guys before they would turn to him.
Right.
And then I think they would turn to him.
And I think Vrabel's the first name because he would excite the fan base. He had an NFL, he's that grinded out. He's all those things you said Ohio State is missing. He is that. You look at that, you just look at him. You're like, yep, that's that. Yeah. And who knows? Like, one of the things I posed out there at that point, Fickell and Vrabel are good friends. Maybe he brings Fickell back as a defensive coordinator. Maybe like Fickell's Wisconsin's not the job for me. And I'll come back. And then they can
and maybe it's some sort of like, hey, I'm only going to be here for 4 or 5 years. I want to get back to the NFL. You come here, run my defense, and then you're the Ohio State coach. Because I still think Luke Fickell would love to be the Ohio State football coach. He's
correct.
Just not
he's such a good guy too. Yeah, he's like the ultimate good guy, and I do enjoy Luke Fickell. He's a good dude, and a good Columbus guy. Well, it is what it is. But I do think I'm going to get to it. I'll just, because I know we're running short on time, but I got Ohio State winning a close one. 23-17, fist fight type game. I can't see Tennessee going up there at night in the cold and winning. I think they're I didn't like how they played at Arkansas. They didn't really. Georgia was 2 scores better than them. They kind of got lucky against Alabama. I know I like Josh Heupel. The possibility to do this exists for them. The window for them to win is there. I'm going to take the Buckeyes 23-17.
Bill, for me, is if Ohio State handles the moment and handles if they can sort of drown out the noise and focus on themselves, this is sort of that unifying moment. We come together, we do all this. It doesn't all of a sudden make their offensive line better. It doesn't all of a sudden make Will Howard better. It doesn't always make Ryan Day a big game head coach. But if it becomes that, they are still the better team than Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
Their defense and I said this to a friend, and I think you're going to agree with me on this. Yes, Ohio State's offense has some matchup issues against Tennessee's really good defense, but there's also matchup issues on the other side. And I think the Ohio State offense has more matchups in its favor against Tennessee's defense, mainly on the perimeter, than Tennessee's offense has against Ohio State's defense.
Right.
Where in every phase, I think Ohio State's defense is better than Tennessee's offense. It may be close in a couple areas, but Ohio State has a very good rush defense. Very good rush defense. And I know it didn't look great against Michigan, but it was not terrible against Michigan either. And a lot of those yards they kind of got were that late last drive running the clock out, type of situation. This is still a very good rush defense that has kept a lot of teams in check, including Penn State. Oregon didn't have a ton of great success running the ball on them, a couple plays here and there. And if they can't run the ball on Ohio State, I don't think they can win this football game. And that's really what it boils down to for me. So if they are able to handle the moment and drown out of the noise, I have Ohio State winning 24-20 in a game that will be competitive. I think Dylan Sampson's going to have some moments early. It's going to look a lot like the Georgia game early, where Tennessee's ground game is going to be able to lean on Ohio State a little bit, get some chunk plays, maybe get a big play down the field to Dante Thornton or two. But I don't think they can do it for 4 quarters against this Ohio State defense. So as long as Ohio State's in the right frame of mind, I have them winning 24-20. Here's my second prediction, Bill.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to end this way. If they don't handle the distractions well, not only do I think Tennessee wins, I think Tennessee wins soundly. I have it 24-20 Ohio State in a game where maybe Tennessee scores late.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And it's a game that Ohio State controls. So 24-20 doesn't mean it's a back and forth game. It's Ohio State wins. It's just they can't blow them out because that's a really good Tennessee defense. But if Ohio State comes in as an unfocused team that doesn't have the motivation you'd think a playoff team would have, I got Tennessee 27-14.
I can see it. That's like the Citrus
You said
Bowl.
27-17, right?
They played that Citrus Bowl in 2020 or 1996.
Mm-hmm.
That's the ironic part of this is 95. Michigan beats Ohio State in the regular season finale. Bianca Batuka. You're still not allowed to say that in Columbus, by the way. It's like cuss word. Tennessee beat them 20-14 in the following bowl game. Jay Graham, 69er touchdown. I
believe that's the only time they've ever played.
I know. It's wild. And that's the cool thing about brings this whole thing full circle. We haven't seen Indiana Notre Dame forever. Bill Trocchi told me all the numbers. Like, we haven't seen Texas Clemson. Haven't seen I remember that Tennessee Ohio State game. I was watching it in my my house as a kid, and the reception wasn't great, but we were watching that game, and Jay Graham had that 69-yard touchdown, and my buddies we went out and played football at halftime. And I think one of the trolls in our group was pretending to be Jay Graham or something, but that didn't go over well. He got hit pretty hard. Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I think it will be a lot of fun this weekend. The curiosity factor is off the charts for me. I hope it works out. I hope it's fun.
Let me ask you this, Bill. I know we wrap up here with this one. I have a question for you. So we made our predictions. You went SMU, Penn State beating SMU 31-20. You went Texas beating Clemson. Was it 31-17, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the one we had the same score. You had Ohio State beating Tennessee 24-17. Right, and then you had Notre Dame winning. Was it 28-24?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Rank your order of those 4. Of if you're wrong, what is your most confident to least like? So of those 4, what are you least confident in being right? So like for me, the game I'm least confident in getting right is the Ohio State Tennessee game. The game I'm most confident in getting right is Notre Dame Tennessee. Next is Texas versus Clemson. Next is SMU versus Penn State, because I just got a sneaky feeling that I might get SMU wrong. I've picked against SMU twice this year, or once this year, and I got that dead wrong. I picked them to lose to Louisville, and that's the only time I've picked against them this year, and I got that wrong. So how would you rank those four? Like, what's the most likely upset to the least likely upset of these four?
All right,
that's how we'll wrap up.
I think Clemson's least likely. I just think Texas is better, and I got that picked as such. I think I would be stunned if SMU went up to Penn State and won the game.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that they'll cover. I think Penn State, again, that's a James Franklin wins that game. That's not a James Franklin game. That's a James Franklin actually does. If it is what James Franklin does, he wins the game. I am probably third most confident that Tennessee and Ohio State will be a close game that Ohio State wins. And then I'm least confident, even though I did pick Indiana to cover, I'm probably least confident in that. It's just that's first game. And I don't know. I go into a first game not knowing what to expect. And for your listeners, I don't know that they should be listening to me. Anyway, I was driving with Grant last night. I do our bowl predictions at Sporting News, do all 41 of them. And I started out, so I'm 4-0 straight up, but I'm 1-3 against the spread. And I missed the first three. And I'm telling Grant in the car ride, I was like, listen, he's like, why are you so mad about Western Kentucky not covering? And I said, listen, I don't want to be the guy that goes 0-41 on bowl predictions. I literally relax when I get the first one right. I can go 1-40. And, I'm like, somewhere out there, somebody will pick this up. I'll go 1-40. I'm not missing all 41 of them. So I stayed up and watched UNLV to make sure they would cover last night, and they did. And so we're 1-3, and it's all uphill from there. And that's how obsessive I am about I hate losing, Brian.
I get it.
I hate losing. I hate losing more than I like winning, and that's one of those things. But yeah, I mean, I that would be the order I would go.
Then last one, Bill, what is the second round game? If all your winners win, you go 4-0 this weekend. What's the second round quarterfinal game you're most looking? What do you think will be the best second round game? So it'll be 1 Oregon versus 8 Ohio State, 4 Arizona State against 5 Texas, 3 Boise against 6 Penn State, 2 Georgia against 7 Notre Dame.
Georgia Notre Dame, hands down, because I think that determines who goes to the national championship game.
Agree.
In my opinion. And then Ohio State, Oregon rematch second. But I have a feeling, and we can't go too far down this road. Maybe we'll talk about it next week. If Ohio State wins, it's almost like that's good enough.
Yeah.
And we go play Oregon, we lose, that's fine.
Yeah.
And then I hate to say it that way.
You could also see the opposite. Hey, we got this off of our back. We've got nothing to lose. Let's go
win. Let's go win it all. Those are the two. And they will determine your bracket, and they will probably determine who holds up that trophy at the end of the day.
I have a sneaky feeling Ohio State's one and done, or they go on a run.
Same.
That's how I feel.
Same.
Yeah.
Feels very much like that.
Well, Bill, great job today. Appreciate you. We will be back next week. We're going to talk about what happened this week, and we'll also preview the quarterfinal games, which will be not next weekend. It'll be on the 31st and the 1st. So, Bill, tell everybody where they can find you as we get out of here. I'm going to answer some super chats here when Bill leaves, folks, so don't leave just yet, but I want Bill to kind of let you guys know where he
is. I've been there 92. This was a lot of fun as always. We'll do this next Thursday, I hope. I think we can squeeze that in.
We'll talk about it, Bill.
We'll talk about it. And thanks so much for having me on. It was good to be back. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Bill.
Take care.
All right, so we did have 4 super chats I did want to get to before we get out of here. We got one from ND Frog 007 with the super chat. Thank you so much. Working, so I'll listen later when I'm trying to get some steps in. Just wanted to thank the staff and the community IP. I'll be trying to make the south end zone as loud as possible tomorrow night. Go Irish. Well, hopefully, ND Frog, you will be able to swing by the tailgate tomorrow night or tomorrow afternoon. We're actually going to probably get out there a little bit earlier than we initially anticipated, probably get out there closer to 1, maybe even a little bit sooner. I will tweet it out, and I'll try to put it on the board as long as the Wi-Fi is good enough. But we will be in the Joyce lot for sure, and we will have an IB flag flying. So just look for that this time. That should make us easier to find. So I look forward to meeting you and everybody else that's going to be there. Very much looking forward to it. AST12321 with a super chat. Thank you very, very much. If Mitchell Evans has a big game, does Indiana have any defensive answers that don't compromise their rush defense? Now, I don't really think so. I mean, you're going to almost have to use your second level players to get a reroute of him. And that takes away a little bit from your ability to defend the run the way that Notre Dame wants you to. Their safeties are guys that they like to get very active. I've talked about this. They've got like 60 some blitzes between those two guys. you're almost forced to kind of play more of a quarters or a too high look if Mitchell Evans is going off. So I think the only answer they have at that point in time is just their D-line is just going to have to whoop the Notre Dame offensive line. That's really their answer is, hey, look, CJ West, James Carpenter, Mikael Kamara, Linnell Carr, you guys are just going to have to ball. You guys are going to have to whoop those guards and whoop that center. That's really what it's going to boil down to. I don't think they have any schematic answers if Mitchell Evans is going off. Maybe some edge pressures where maybe they bracket Mitchell Evans and try to bring some weak side pressures, maybe. But if you're going three, the problem is Notre Dame does so much 3-by-1 that if you blitz that nickel, you can't have, and you're bracketing Mitchell Evans, you're going to be a man down if you try to bring some of those edge fires and safety fires they like to bring. So I think it puts them in a really tough spot. Beefeater, Indy 08 with a super chat. Thank you very much. Merry Christmas, Brian, Trevor, and IB family. Thank you. Merry Christmas to you as well. Do we think playing Army prepared us for IU better than playing USC? The Notre Dame offense, yes. The Notre Dame defense, absolutely not. Playing USC absolutely prepared Notre Dame's defense better for playing Indiana because you have more spread sets. You have similar type of athlete on the perimeter. You have to defend against the deep ball. You have to defend against the double moves. They put you in a lot of similar binds to what Indiana prepares you for. So when you look at it for the Notre Dame defense, the USC game was a phenomenal test for them for this playoff game because of a lot of things that USC does are things that you're going to see Indiana do in some capacity. And of course, the speed on the perimeter is going to help better prepare you for that. Now, on the other side of the ball, I think for the Notre Dame offense, playing Army was a great test for what you're going to face. USC was a test to some degree because USC does some funky looks and that helps prepare you for them, but they're not as physical as what Army was up front. And that's something that Indiana is a physical football team and a tough, hard-nosed football team that you're going to have to be prepared for. So I think it just depends on what side of the ball we're talking about, Beefeater, to be completely honest with you. I think that's more of where I look at it is the Notre Dame offense got a better test against Army. The Notre Dame defense got a better test and helped prepare them better by playing USC. Paulie B with his last super chat. Thank you very much, Paulie. Brian and Trev wanted to get your thoughts on Coach Golden starting out in a zone scheme, since one would think that IU is heavily prepping for man. I mean, look, Notre Dame is going to mix up their looks. They're not just going to come out and just line up and say, hey, we're going to come out and just play man every single down. That's not who Notre Dame is. They're going to play a ton of man though. And to me, if you stop doing what you do that got you here because you're afraid of that other team taking advantage of it, then you're coaching a little bit scared. I think Notre Dame is going to mix up its looks like they have a lot this year. They're going to get a lot of man coverage at corner. It's in the slots and over the, that's where they kind of mix things up a little bit, roll down one, roll back the other, flip it, drop them both back, do some combo coverages where you're maybe playing 2 to the field or 2 to the boundary and mix up your looks a lot that way. But you got to go with what got you here. And what's got you here is you are a really good man coverage team. You've got 2 talented cornerbacks. You got to trust them to go make plays. You can't coach scared and you can't play scared. And so, they're going to be prepared for that. So for me, it's more so you've got to have better communication on certain type of route combinations and certain type of run looks that have caused you some problems. You need to have some adjustments for that schematically. But I think you still have to go with what got you here. And what got Notre Dame here was an elite secondary that plays a lot of man coverage on the perimeter with their corners. And then you can mix some things up with your safeties. That's where you can get creative. But you've got to go. I mean, look, I'm a big believer in this. You always adjust to what you're going to play, and you have to prepare for your opponent and all that stuff. And Notre Dame doesn't do the same exact thing every game. But you're a heavy man team. And that's who you are. And you got to believe in that. And you've got to stick to that. Just coach it up well, have some looks that are going to keep Indiana from being able to take advantage of it. I would say maybe, play a little bit more with some inside leverage in certain situations to take away some of the slants and glances and things like that. And then that allows you to not maybe bite on those double moves as much because you're playing inside leverage. So that double move doesn't affect me as much. You're going to have to cross my face to get me to really bite on it. and that takes away some of the easy access throws that Curtis Rourke likes to have on the RPO game or in the quick game. He came out against Michigan, bangs a slant route in the first play of the game, and those type of things, and force him to throw the ball further outside. Now that also exposes you some different things, and you'd have to have a plan for that. But those are the type of wrinkles maybe you could do, but you're still playing man coverage, and especially on the outside, because Notre Dame will mix up a lot more zone type of looks inside the corners. They'll kind of man up the outside guys and do some different things and some different, I don't know if it's pattern match. I don't know if it's that, but it's just some different looks where they'll maybe pass off guys in the slot, the nickels, and linebackers and safeties and things like that. So you mix up some of those looks, but you're not going to, you still got to be true to who you are. Still got to be true to who you are. So that's today's show. Hey, and there was a question from Brandon Rouse. It says, I get off at 4 p.m. tomorrow. Can I come to the tailgate? Absolutely. If you're an IB fan or a Notre Dame fan and you're in the area and you're not going to the game, but you live around town and you want to come. If you're someone who is going to the game, but you get off work late and you're going to come late, still come. I'll be there till 6. So we'll get there probably, like I said, around 1 o'clock. About around 6. I got to go up and get ready for work and go in there. Probably 6:15 at the latest is when I'll go in. I'll probably be gone for just a few minutes. Around 4, I got to go get my credentials and stuff. But we'll be there. So if you get off work at 4, Brandon, come on over. We'll be there, man, and we'll be ready to rock and roll. And I'm looking forward to meeting all of you. It's going to be a lot of fun. Going to have a lot of food, a lot of drinks. Y'all don't have to bring anything. There's no entry fee. There's no payment you have to make. You can bring whatever friends and family you have with you. You don't have to be a premium board member to come. All those. I want to make sure that all those things are understood. No fee, no requirement as far as being a board member. If you are a partaker of any part of the Irish Breakdown content, whether you're just a podcast listener or a YouTube watcher or whatever the case may be, you're welcome. This is for all aspects of the Irish Breakdown family. You want to bring friends with you? Bring friends with you. You want to bring family with you? Bring family with you. That's the only requirement. Just come, spend time with us, enjoy it. We're gonna have, like I said, a lot of food, have drinks. My mom's picking up some stuff to make coffee and hot cocoa for tomorrow. It's gonna be a lot of fun, and I look forward to meeting a lot of you at the game tomorrow. So, if for those traveling today and tomorrow, safe travels. Look forward to seeing you guys all tomorrow. It's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait. We're going to find out tomorrow night just how good this Notre Dame football team is, and we're going to find out about whether or not we're having to plan for what's next for Notre Dame for next season, or are we going to talk about planning what's next for Notre Dame in a week and a half when they head down to New Orleans, and we're going to find that out here. Gosh, we're about, 21 hours away. We'll have our answer. I can't wait for it. And, of course, we'll do a post-game show afterwards. The post-game show is going to start a little bit later because I decided I want to allow my team to enjoy the entire game. I don't want Vince and Trevor having to leave the stadium early like we normally do to get home in time to start the podcast right when the game's over. If it's a blowout, then we may leave early. But if it's the game we think it's going to be, then we're going to stay to the end because I don't want my team to miss this. Look, next year, if their home playoff game will be a different deal because we've experienced it. But this is a cool deal, and I want my team who worked their butts off throughout the year to be able to enjoy this moment and enjoy it for all that it's worth. So just so you guys know, we will get started with our podcast a little bit later for the post-game show. We will go live, but it's going to be a little bit later than it normally is. It won't be right after the game, most likely. But that's why you need to make sure after you've hit that like button that you're subscribed to the channel, that you make sure you hit the notification bells. Follow me on Twitter if you're on Twitter at CoachD178. And, of course, we always put our show on the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So you'll get all those different ways of being notified that when we are going to be going live tomorrow after the Notre Dame game, which we all hope is a Notre Dame victory. So we'll see you all again here very soon on the Irish Breakdown podcast.